Hello, my lovely, lovely imps, and welcome to yet another episode of DramaMama Investigations. Here on DramaMama Investigations, we try to get to the bottom of internet drama, some very important, some more frivolous. We try to get to the bottom and present all of the receipts. The idea is to get you into the loop with drama that's been going on the internet, usually in political spaces and stuff like that, so that you can be in the loop, so that you don't have to feel like you're a dum-dum anymore. If you're here and you're enjoying it so far, and you're excited for what we're about to talk about, please click the like button, press subscribe on my YouTube page, and, of course, consider donating or joining my Patreon. This is a viewer-supported show, so please help me out. I'd love it. Today, we have a very, very, very interesting thing on the table. But before we jump into the meat of it, I want you to know, did you know that we have an entire playlist on my channel of DramaMama episodes? We have a DramaMama episode on DC movies. We have a DramaMama episode on the complete and utter meltdown of Activision Blizzard. We have a DramaMama episode on obscure internet feuds that dives really deep. We have a DramaMama episode on the strange disappearance of Virgil, Texas. It's super interesting. Please check out the playlist. There's literally like 15 DramaMama episodes that you can have fun with today after you watch this one, of course. Today, though, we are talking about the strange case of Caleb Maupin. Now, Caleb Maupin is a figure that, if you're involved in like any sort of online left conversation or any communities around the online left, you probably know the name Caleb Maupin. Not everybody knows exactly what he's done. We're certainly gonna talk about that today, as far as like his career and things like that. But to summarize what we're gonna be talking about today, a enormous letter full of allegations of sexual abuse, financial abuse, and general cult-like behavior has been dropped within the last 2 days. I can get the exact date in just a minute. So there's a lot for us to go over today. We're going to be reading through the letter of allegations, which contains a lot of evidence within the actual letter, and we're also going to be looking at some other materials that build a case against Caleb Maupin. And the idea here is not to refute anyone's claims or agree with anyone's claims, but first to just set out what's going on, and then afterwards we're gonna have a discussion and I'll give my read of the situation. We look into the evidence first, we do the investigation portion, and then afterwards we talk about it. We're probably going to talk about some pretty intense stuff today. Again, these are allegations of financial and sexual abuse, so just be prepared for that. Trigger warning right now. There's a lot to talk about, so keep in mind it might take a little bit. But thank you for being here, and I hope that you will find this interesting, fascinating, and also informative. I think it's really important to talk about stuff like this, as some of you who've been watching for a while probably know. I talk about issues of allegations of sexual abuse in these spaces relatively frequently, and also with a pretty significant amount of seriousness, because I think it's all over the place. I think that sexual abuse is disgustingly profuse in basically all political and all entertainment adjacent spaces. It's normalized, and a lot of people are hurt by it. So I think it's important to talk about. It is an epidemic, I agree. Without any further ado, let's start. So what we're gonna start with real quick is I'm gonna give you a real quick summary on who Caleb Maupin actually is. And you know what? Why don't we start right from the source? Now, I will be completely open and unbiased in saying I have criticized Maupin a lot in the past, and you'll probably understand why I've criticized him in the past. But to start this off, we're gonna go to from the horse's mouth itself. We're gonna go straight to Caleb Maupin's webpage, and we're gonna just take a look at what Caleb Maupin, and how Caleb Maupin describes himself, because that's kind of important, as it turns out. So here we go. The biography of Caleb Maupin. Caleb Maupin is that voice, that professor, that sage you knew existed, but were never lucky enough to meet. Now that's a bold start. Now, to be fair, we all do a little bit of self-promotion out here, but that's kind of a lot, you know. Say that like, you know, a professor and a sage is kind of it's kind of landing on thick, okay? I think he said it. I think the implication here is that he said it. And this is what Caleb Maupin looks like. You know, if you want to get a closer look, here we go. There's Caleb Maupin. Let's get nice and close in there, you know. There you go. That's Caleb Maupin. Yep. So, but yeah. So Caleb Maupin has, like I said, he's gotten around in these spaces. In his, according to him, he's a widely acclaimed speaker, writer, journalist, and political analyst. He says he's traveled extensively across the Middle East and Latin America. He was involved with Occupy Wall Street movement from its early planning stages. I don't really know how easily that would be verifiable, but all right. He's been involved in many struggles for social justice. He's an outspoken advocate of international friendship and cooperation, as well as 21st century socialism. He doesn't shy away from the word communism when explaining his political views, and he advocates that the USA move towards some form of socialism with American characteristics, rooted in the democratic and egalitarian traditions often found in American history. He argues that the present crisis can only be abetted with an American rebirth in which the radicalism and community-centered values of the country are reestablished and strengthened. So you can see even from this starting paragraph, you can see right from the starting paragraph that Caleb Maupin takes his American identity pretty seriously. I believe he has described himself in the past as a patriotic socialist or a patriotic communist. And he has... And this is where some of his messaging gets a little muddled because he spends a lot of time working with non-American sources and also like making a lot of critiques of America, but then he also pushes for a very like a highly patriotic view of communism, which is a little bit odd. Now, Caleb Maupin isn't just like a traveling speaker or anything like that. He also has written a lot of books. Now, this is where things are going to start to get a little bit murky. And the reason for that is that Caleb Maupin isn't exactly always very honest about the things that he's done in the past. Let me give you a quick example of this, okay? Here we go. So if you go to, this is his website. This is calebmaupin.com. This is his official website. It's still up as of right now, though he's deleted most of his social media. And here he lists his books. City Builders and Vandals in Our Age, Getting Rich Without Capitalism, America's Way Out, Oil and the Global Capitalist Crisis, which has like these pictures of pump jacks with the CIA behind it. And you know, these are his books. But interestingly, there's a couple of books that he doesn't list on his website. Which, you know, on the surface, you might be like, well, you know, it's anybody's right to not list all of their books. But I'm going to show you real quick, just real quick. I'm going to show you one of the books that he doesn't list on here, okay? So here's the books that he has listed on Google. You know, he has a couple of other books, The Rise and Fall of the U.S. Communist Party, The 2016 Elections and the Crisis of American Liberalism, and also this book, which is called Satan at the Fountainhead, The Israel Lobby and the Financial Crisis, which is his book from 2015. Now, Caleb Maupin sort of initially caught a lot of flack for this book. And there's a pretty good reason why. You might think it's a little bit weird to say something like, you know, Satan at the Fountainhead as the title of your book that's about the Israel Lobby and the financial crisis, which in and of itself is a, let's just say that's a very interesting combination of imagery and concepts. But if I want to see, can we look at the cover? Yeah, we can. This is the cover. The cover shows a crowd of, I don't know, zombie-like looking people, and then has a panel here of a Jewish speaker at AIPAC, and then at top has a picture of Wall Street, all with the Israel lobby and the financial crisis. It's pretty rough. And of course, the main critiques of his book, I mean, we can read the summary here. This book is an honest attempt to answer the question of those who want to know what happened. In the view of the author, the catastrophic events of 2008 and the continued economic decay of the United States are the culmination of a number of policies and trends. These trends and policies carried out by both the government and the private sector are not isolated from global events. U.S. foreign policy, especially those related to the ongoing conflicts in the Middle East region, are directly linked to continuous economic decline and the 2008 financial crash. The key players who are responsible for the crisis have not limited their malfeasance to U.S. soil. So immediately this kind of screams out as, you know, pretty anti-Semitic off the bat. But let's say that you want to give him the benefit of the doubt and say, you know, maybe the title is yikesy and maybe the art is yikesy. But a lot of the reviews here explicitly talk about how much anti-Semitism there is in the book. I mean, we can just read this review right here. I don't think Caleb knows what words mean, turning this into a hilarious book more reminiscent of someone screaming about how they're not anti-Semitic, followed by some of the worst anti-Semitic sentences you could possibly imagine online. The attempts at real history are copied straight from Wikipedia, followed by what can only be described as conspiracy theorists that blame Zionist bankers, by which he obviously means Jews, for bringing the world to the brink of the war, which he thinks is the great threat caused by capitalism today, which just makes you wonder, does Caleb even believe in climate change? By the way, Caleb, the way I use quotation marks here is how you're supposed to use them. I get that writing a word in 3 parentheses on both sides of a word takes more effort when you're trying to seem like you're not talking about Jews, but please learn to write, hire one editor. This is just a huge Twitter thread where he's trying to both make himself seem less anti-Semitic while doing the opposite, and a fan fiction about Roosevelt masquerading as political theory. So he's caught a lot of flack, and keep in mind, this isn't just a one-off review. If you go read basically any review of this book, a lot of, like most of them bring up the anti-Semitism. Unless they're just 5-star reviews praising him to the high heavens, there is a lot of discussion of how anti-Semitic the book gets at parts. So it is interesting that he chooses not to show that book on his book page, okay? So the books are one part of Caleb Maupin's past that has caught criticism and whatnot. But there's more, okay? I need to show you something else, okay? Real quick, I just gotta show you this real quick, okay? This is another piece of Caleb Maupin's history, all right? So this is a YouTube playlist, which is actually curated by Caleb Maupin himself. As you can see, this is the Caleb Maupin YouTube account. This is the playlist that Caleb Maupin himself has made, which features 158 videos of his sections on Russia Today. So over the course of years and years and years, Caleb Maupin has appeared as a contributor to the Russian state media outlet Russia Today, which is a lot, you know? It's a lot. And there's a lot of people who have criticized him for his willingness to essentially be a propagandist directly on the payroll of Russia Today. Now, this is just his YouTube history. This is just the videos that he's appeared in, but that's hardly all of it. In fact, it's quite easy, and I'm going to show you right now. It's quite easy to find his history of op-eds that were also written and paid for by Russia Today. So here's Caleb Maupin, and here's his page going back going back as far as 2015. Let's see, is that the earliest one? Nope, 2014. Let's see how far back we can go, how long he's been contributing to Russia Today, which is, once again, Russia state-owned media. This is not like a Russian favorable channel. It is owned by the Russian government. So, April 2nd, 2013. So, this is the earliest article. He's been a contributor he's been a contributor to Russia Today for nearly 10 years, and he's done over 158 videos for Russia Today on YouTube. He is a very, very, very prolific Russian supporter. He, of course, supported the Russian war in Ukraine. He has pushed for it really harshly. He's been out there and done that, okay? So there you go. Now you're starting to get the sort of history of Caleb Maupin. But Caleb Maupin didn't just write books and work for a Russian state media outlet doing favorable coverage, constant praising, like adulation for the state of Russia. You know, Vladimir Putin, the state that is currently has currently waging war in Ukraine, a war which has killed over 5,000 civilians, a war that was explicitly about imperial aggression. You know, a war in which on the starting days of it, Vladimir Putin literally said, you know, the Russian Empire deserves to be restored to its former glory, which includes Ukraine. Yeah, so there's a lot going on here, but that's not all. He also founded an organization, an American political think tank and advocacy group, let's call it that, which was called the Center for Political Innovation, or CPI USA. Now, if we're to go to CPI USA, their website right now, let's just go there right now together. We're going to go to their website. Here's their website right here, the Center for Political Innovation. Their homepage now reads like this. So this is quoting the homepage. As of 3 p.m. CST, August 21, 2022, the Executive Committee of the Center for Political Innovation has unanimously voted to dissolve the organization in its entirety and all operating facets. All dues-paying memberships will be canceled in the next 24 hours as the operation winds down. As individual members' lives move on, we ask that you keep in mind that this is one moment in time within the struggle for a better world. Do not let this be the end of your story. Continue to build revolutionary foundations, continue to rigorously improve yourself, and continue to fight. We thank every member from the bottom of our hearts for their help in building the Center for Political Innovation. We, the Executive Committee, feel that in the short time CPI was operating, that we contributed a great deal to the development of American socialism, and that the legacy for the Center of Political Innovation will move on to influence generations to come. Solidarity, the Executive Committee of the Center for Political Innovation. So that's what the current homepage of this organization he founded says. I want to show you guys something, okay? And I will admit, this is it's a little mean, but it is only fair. I want to show you the last, to my knowledge, the last major gathering of CPI members. The CPI put together a convention in Chicago, and I just want to show that to you because I think it'll give you an idea of the type of organization that the CPI was, and you can then decide for yourself whether or not CPI actually advanced American socialism. Okay, so let's watch this. This is footage from the Chicago CPI convention, which was, if I'm not mistaken, this was on the 7th of August. I believe this occurred sometime around the 7th of August. I could be slightly wrong about it. Let's watch together. Here we go. You can see their logo there. Now, for those of you, just real quick, I just wanted to take a minute to pause that. So first it was playing a tune called the Internationale, which is a song celebrating the rise of global communism. And then it was followed up by the American national anthem, the Star Spangled Banner. And then they flew the flag of the Soviet Union and the flag of the Donbas People's Republic, which is a Russian-formed satellite state in the war against Ukraine. Russia took a piece and they said, this is now the Donbas region People's Republic. And then, of course, they also display the Z. The Z being a sort of Russian, it is a, how do I say this? It's a Russian nationalist symbol that has come into popularity since the war in Ukraine began. It essentially means, it basically means Russian pride. And it's been displayed on Russian vehicles as they invade Ukraine. Just so we know what's being displayed here and what sort of things are being celebrated at this beautiful ceremony. Yeah. So that's the CPIs. That was the to my knowledge, I could be slightly wrong about this small bit. I'm not 100% sure, but to my knowledge, that was the last like in-person gathering, like public-facing in-person gathering the CPI had before their dissolution, which happened one day ago. They dissolved yesterday. So you're starting to get an idea of the history of Caleb Maupin and what sort of purpose Caleb Maupin has chosen for himself in the world. Caleb Maupin is essentially a PR representative for the current what I would consider to be highly imperialistic Russian government, which is currently waging a war, mass murdering civilians, and mostly attacking, dense cities full of civilians. Yeah, they're fascistic. So I have a lot of I think there's like a lot of reasons that a lot of people feel pretty strongly about Caleb Maupin and his advocacy. But this is just to get you an idea of who, what, and where all of this Caleb Maupin stuff is. Keep in mind that some of the people, if I'm not mistaken, some of the people in that ceremony were actually people who later went on to write in this letter bringing accusations against Caleb Maupin, which we are about to read. So just keep that all in mind. Caleb Maupin, controversial figure. He's also had another thing about Caleb Maupin. Caleb Maupin has also been very heavily involved in critiquing BreadTube. BreadTube being a very colloquial term for a bunch of left-leaning YouTubers. Some people say that I'm part of BreadTube. I don't know. I don't think that anybody can really be a part of BreadTube. It's given to you by audience members. It's just it's like a consumer category, basically. He made ridiculous claims like saying that TYT is BreadTube and lots of other things. But another thing is that he's beefed with a lot of individual people. He's argued and had public debates with a lot of members of BreadTube. And in fact, last I checked, he was writing a book. Let me just double check on this. He was, yes, he did. He was, I don't know if he's still gonna finish it. Or maybe he did finish it? Did he actually publish it? Let me double check here. Oh, maybe he did finish it. It just doesn't have a cover. Let's take a look. He did. He finished this book. This was his latest book, which is called BreadTube Serves Imperialism, Examining the New Brand of Internet Pseudo-Socialism. Now, you might think that it's a little bit ironic that he would call anybody a pseudo-socialist while sitting at the head of a organization that basically seems to be a tiny American fan club for Russian military aggression. And you would be right to say that seems a little bit hypocritical, because it definitely, absolutely is. Most of what Caleb Maupin has done has been, well, engaging in spectacle, which, by the way, I'm an entertainer, but I don't pretend to be a revolutionary of the highest order or whatever. Caleb Maupin, Caleb Maupin, yeah. Also, though, which should come as no surprise, is the fact that Caleb Maupin has been publicly very close to a number of extremely questionable figures. One of those being Alexander Dugin. Alexander Dugin, who is largely credited with creating an ideology called nationalist Bolshevism. Obviously, there's some historical history to that term and that terminology, but Alexander Dugin was largely responsible for pushing this idea, which is what it sounds like. It's Nazism mixed with communism, a specific brand of Stalinistic communism. Alexander Dugin is also often referred to as the sort of brain behind Putin. It's kind of like a Dick Cheney type. Some people call him Red Brown or Red Fash. And recently, unrelated to this, but nonetheless interesting, recently, Darya Dugin, the daughter of Alexander Dugin, and also a very loud, very prominent proponent of the war against Ukraine, was killed in a car bomb, which was intended to kill Alexander Dugin, but it actually killed Darya, who is for the record, a 30-year-old adult who has been engaged in actively pushing the war in Ukraine. So before anybody is like, well, they killed his daughter, she is also a propagandist. She works for the Russian government. She has literally called Ukrainian people subhumans, etc. But yes. And yeah, recently she was blown up. And of course, all of Maupin's associates have been mourning the loss of such a heroic figure. Yeah. So let us, without any further ado, let us actually go to the letter itself. Caleb Maupin's former comrades speak out. His abuses must stop. This was published by a group called CPI Members Speak Out, and there are a number of co-signers to this. This letter has been cross-referenced by their public social media pages, and in the follow-up to this letter coming out, Caleb Maupin not only shut down the CPI, but also deleted all of his social media profiles, as far as we can tell, with the exception of YouTube, where he hosts videos. His Twitter is gone. I believe like his Instagram and Facebook pages are also gone. Not that anybody really like uses those for politics as much. Anyway, let us read what's going on here. Here we have a picture of Caleb Maupin with members DL, Nick, member 1, DL, Nick, member 1, and member 2. Summary and information for the reader. Now we're gonna read through this whole thing, so let's strap in and we'll go from here. This is probably going to be the heaviest part of the stream, so just be ready. Summary and information for the reader. Bringing forward this statement was not easy for any of us, but there was no alternative to speaking the truth. It's our responsibility to stop abuse of power against comrades. Those of us who want to fight for the ideas of constructive, optimistic socialism and anti-imperialism, and who have contributed to the organization's Center of Political Innovation, have been betrayed by Caleb Maupin. Over the years, he has subjected members of CPI to various forms of abuse and exploitation. He pushed his sexual desires on members who had considered him to be a leading comrade. he brought his sexual impulses into political organizing. Caleb pushed a member out of CPI and its predecessor, Students and Youth for a New America, SYNA, after she made clear that she would not do sexual favors for him. Oh boy. Caleb paid a member for sex who he knew was economically desperate, and then went on to push them out of the group and slander them. Caleb Maupin also targeted people in their teens with manipulative cult tactics in an effort to exploit their labor so that he could build himself up off their hard work and sacrifice. And then he would go on to slander them behind their backs if they didn't do exactly what he wanted. So, something that you probably noticed while we were looking at his website, including the way that he talked about himself, there have been a number of red flags in the history of Caleb Maupin's past, his public presence, that would indicate that he had the intentions of building a certain type of personality cult around him. And we're not just talking, you know, he's a guy who likes it when people like him, or that he wants to be famous, or that he, you know, he's really a go-getter. We're talking about a guy who would manipulate people using these broad statements of his own grandeur, of his devotion to saving the world, quite literally. He would use broad, inciting language about how they're going to fight for the poor of America. They're fighting for the downtrodden. They're fighting for you. And at the end of the day, that was used to get people to do stuff for him, to get people to do things for him, often without any compensation whatsoever. It's a toxic fan club that targeted vulnerable people. Let's continue. The abuses Caleb Maupin committed could have also done tremendous damage to all of us by discrediting all who associate with our political position. Despite these revelations, now is not a time to despair. It is a time to fight even harder for an optimistic socialism and anti-imperialism. That's a term they like to use a lot. By the way, thank you very much, worshiper of the Olympians, for supporting the stream. Really, really appreciate that. It's a difficult reality for many to face, but Caleb Maupin's primary concern has not been advancing the cause of anti-imperialism. His primary concern has been self-gain at the expense of others. However, our goal is not to make an overly simplified picture of Caleb Maupin or to demonize him unjustly. Our statements give credit where it is due, but at the same time, they demonstrate his abusive behavior very clearly. The following statements from CPI members will show in detail how all of this was the case. If you would like to get in contact, or if you have any questions, please direct them to Center for Political Innovation New York at gmail.com. The two members who were victims of Caleb's sexual misconduct wrote their statements in pseudonyms to protect themselves from any retaliation or harassment. Please respect their privacy. If you have any evidence of Caleb's further abuse, please come forward. So there's a call for other people who may not be known. Two, Caleb Maupin's sexual misconduct. 2A, Member 2's statement. This is from the pseudonymous Member 2 who has come forward to publish this. And keep in mind that while we do not know the identities outside of the picture that was provided above, even though we don't know the identities of Member 1 and Member 2, the identities of these people has been verified by other verified members of the organization. So it's quite fair to, these are rather solidly sourced claims. These claims, like I said, have been cross-referenced with many other members of the group. And of course, the group also shut down afterwards. So the members of the council stepped out in solidarity with these members, even though we don't know the names of these people. So just keep that in mind. When I first met Caleb, I was 19 years old, living on my own for the first time and paying my rent with my own paychecks while going to school full time. I was in a very vulnerable place socially and financially, At the same time, though, I consider myself to be more mature than my peers because of how independent I was compared to my other political science classmates, and because I was one of the only communists. When I met him, Caleb Maupin, a prominent YouTuber and an accomplished journalist over a decade older than me who treated me like his intellectual equal, he made me feel intelligent and important, especially since he would frequently take me out to dinner where we would discuss our political ambitions and the think tank he wanted me to help him build, the Center for Political Innovation. Beginning in 2019, we would have dinner together at least once a month, and sometimes during those dinners, he would bring up what I assumed at the time was his academic interest in corporal punishment, especially spanking. So we really are going to have to talk about kink and BDSM. For those of you who don't know, I am a avid supporter of BDSM, kink, and consensual, healthy, beneficial kink play. So we're going to talk about that. I have some grounds on which to talk, and we will be talking about this, but I didn't realize we were going to get into this so quickly. We'll talk about that as this goes on. Let's continue reading for now. As time went on, we became closer and closer friends, which led to him confiding in me in 2020 during the beginning of the COVID pandemic that his academic special interest was actually, in fact, a sexual one. He even told me that he would engage other people in conversations about corporal punishment and spanking because it turned him on to do so. When we became closer friends in 2021, he finally admitted to me that he would masturbate to the thought of roping unsuspecting people, especially women, into these conversations about their experiences with being spanked and other forms of physical abuse. I tend to be a very open and sexually liberal person, so I don't really mind when my friends discuss their sex life with me in a platonic way. As a matter of fact, I was honored that Caleb supposedly trusted me enough that he was willing to share that part of his life with me. However, I was still under the impression that he was interested in me as a platonic friend and comrade, nothing else, which is why I continued to participate in CPI's conferences and events, including facilitating CPI's California conference for him in September 2021, which entailed Caleb and I traveling together and sharing a hotel room and transportation. Back then, I was working for a math tutoring company. Caleb knew that this job was incredibly important to me and that I needed the income to pay off my student loans and other financial expenses. I only agreed to go to California with Caleb under the condition that I would be able to work on the Monday we left because I had already been assigned a shift that day. When I asked him, he told me it wouldn't be an issue because the conference was Friday through Sunday, so that Monday I could work after we checked out of the hotel. Nonetheless, when Monday rolled around, Caleb insisted that he wanted to have lunch at a Mexican restaurant before we left and refused to get me a separate Uber to get to the airport early so I could work. Since I couldn't complete my shift in the restaurant, I ended up missing it and losing my job as a result. Even though I told him this is exactly what would happen and I explained to him the many reasons why I couldn't afford to lose my job, when I did get fired, Caleb insisted that I will be okay and that we, himself and CPI, will not abandon you. Little did I know that when Caleb reassured me he'd help me find another job, he didn't necessarily mean another tutoring gig. So this right here is something that people talk about a lot when they're discussing abusive relationships and specifically cult behavior, okay? And what that is isolating from other social groups. The reality is that many cults are not entirely compelling as a social space on their own. There's a lot of strange things that most cults engage in, and that's sort of to be understood to some degree, as most cults are very religious in nature and are seeking to, forward some sort of religious agenda. But one of the things that is a constant red flag for both abusive relationships and cults is an attempt to isolate a potential victim from other social connections that they have. This seems like a fairly obvious example of this. This person said, hey, I have really, really, really important social, social responsibilities to uphold. I need to go to my job. My job is very important to me. And Caleb Maupin put himself in a position of power and also interceded to ensure that that connection was cut, that that person now no longer had income. That person was now not only being controlled in a social manner, but also perhaps was forced into a position of relying on Caleb Maupin so that they wouldn't become homeless, for example. If you don't have a job, you can't pay rent. If you don't have, we don't know anything else about this person, but we don't know what their family situation is. For all we know, they might not have other safety nets. That job seems to be very, very, very important to them. So again, what we have here is a pretty obvious example of Caleb interceding to force someone out of a social situation that they were benefiting from and that they were gaining and that they were gainfully employed in, that they were, that they felt strongly about. So that's pretty wrong from the get-go. But let's continue and see where this goes. Remember on Monday when I said that missing that shift might cost me my job? I was unfortunately correct. Caleb Maupin over here says, I will call you when I get home tonight. Okay, I'm really sorry, Caleb. I'll do my best to find another job. And then Caleb said, why are you apologizing? You're doing your best. I'm really sorry this happened. I will try to help you however I can. You will be okay. You are safe. How will your dad's credit being affected prevent him from making mortgage payments? He's on a mortgage, so that has some kind of variable rate. So if his credit goes down, his payments go up. I don't know the exact particulars, but it was one of those predatory mortgages in the early 2000s. Well, you should talk to him soon. Try not to catastrophize and say one thing necessarily leads to another. You need a new job. That's what we're dealing with. Okay, you're right. I need to take a step back and breathe. I have BPD and OCD, so catastrophizing tends to be my brain's default mode. I'm not ready to talk to my dad yet, though. I can't even stop crying, let alone hold a conversation with the most judgmental person in my life. Okay, so what these are revealing, first of all, these texts are revealing two things. One, they're revealing a incredibly, incredibly intimate relationship between this pretty young person who doesn't, a pretty intimate relation between the founder and organizer of a pretty big organization and this pretty young member, a young junior member. So a newcomer to this organization who's very passionate about politics, and this person Caleb is deeply, deeply, deeply digging into this person's life. Like I can't think of a single time with any boss that I've talked to this level, like any organization I've ever been with. That's pretty deep. I would argue that's almost like how you would talk with a therapist or a pastor or a mentor, something along those lines. So that's something to keep in mind, that this is also something that tends to happen. The reason why young people are often targeted for cults is because they tend to be, first of all, slightly inexperienced, but also they tend to not have a lot of ground to stand on their own. And they don't necessarily know exactly what to expect. So if somebody, an older person who's very successful, comes in and is like, here, I can help you, and then all of a sudden, that young person finds themselves completely relying on that older, more experienced, richer person, that can be a very, very bad dynamic. So people have to be careful about that, even in the best of circumstances. And this is not the best of circumstances. What we've also revealed from these texts is, in fact, that member number 2 did not have a strong relationship with their family. Again, another thing that cults and abusers tend to look for is people who don't really have a whole lot of other connections, people who can be isolated easily, or who could be isolated in such a way that their family members won't be able to help them or are unwilling to help them. Let's continue. Keaton, I don't know who that is. Keaton assures me he is on his way to you right now. It's okay to let your emotions out. This is a big loss. I'm about to go see him. Thank you for helping to comfort me. I really appreciate it. We are your friends and we will not abandon you. That's very reassuring to hear. At least I'm not alone in this. So you can see there's a lot of strong, some people would call this love bombing. A thing that cults tend to do is a thing called love bombing. Love bombing is when there is something distressing, or if someone is distressed, by something in a cult setting or in a setting like this. A love bombing is when numerous, usually senior members of the organization all come in rapid succession. They all come and they layer you with all kinds of love and support and acceptance. That's usually the whole thing that makes it a love bomb. Why they call it a love bomb and not just like love in general is because it all comes suddenly when there's a problem, and then it disappears just as suddenly. If anyone has seen the movie Midsommar, it's a very popular movie, but it's a movie that actually has a great depiction of love bombing. There's a scene in the movie where one of the main characters sees something incredibly violent and distressing, and immediately afterwards, she's literally physically surrounded by 15 other older women from the cult that they're in the movie, and they all sit with her, they all cry with her, they're all like, "You're gonna be okay." They're hugging her and touching her. It's called love bombing for a reason. So the love bombing, like I said, it's important to distinguish that love bombing isn't just providing support. It's a type of support that is specifically designed to basically quiet your concerns. And it is most frequently employed when it seems like someone might defect, when it seems like someone is hurting or beginning to doubt the organization. Then comes the love bomb. And again, one of the things is it's usually senior members who can be trusted, who come in and tell you it's gonna be okay, it's gonna be fine, we love you, we love you. Even though this is a really, really weird thing to have happen in your weird political organization, okay? Yeah, so let's continue. The main conflict between Caleb and I that arose after I lost my job was this. I'd started living in Jersey City with the John Brown Volunteers in August 2021. So she's living, or they're living with other people involved in these political organizations, which is a precarious position to be in. So I had been paying $200 a week in rent to Caleb to cover my portion of the $600 per week hotel cost. That's shitty. Why the hell wouldn't Caleb cover this? If you're there to help him, why the hell are you paying that? Oh, that's ridiculous. Whatever, let's not get into that. That's silly. Before I moved in, Caleb had been paying the exact same hotel rate for only Joey and Keaton to live there, but he told me I had to pay a third of the rent when I moved in because he was supposedly paying the rest of all of our expenses. Despite this agreement, I was paying the majority of the household expenses for the John Brown Volunteers because the only money we received to support ourselves was the half of our canvassing money we kept each day. Most of the time, we'd make about 30 to 100 per day total. So when I lost my math tutoring job, Caleb still expected me to continue financially supporting the John Brown Volunteers. Wait a minute, that's even worse. Hold on a second. Wait a minute, that's even worse. This is talking about, wait, hold on a second. Member number 2, the person who's telling this story, was not only helping to pay for the travel hotel, they were also living in a house that was run and organized by Caleb with other members underneath Caleb. There is so many concerns for a political institute, a political think tank, living with the members underneath the leader and founder, and they're making you pay to live with those other members. Again, this is something we talk about a lot. Holy shit. This is a thing that we talk about a lot when we're analyzing abusive situations, abusive structures, and cults. Another form of social isolation is replacing other outside social connections. Churches, extremist churches, fundamentalist churches often engage in behavior just like this. What they'll do is over time, you're invited to more and more events. You're invited to be there. They want you to come live with them. And all of a sudden you find that every day, the only people you're talking to are other members in the group. They never, and nobody, no dissent. You no longer are talking to people outside of the group, or if you are, it's very rare. Your day-to-day interactions are surrounded by other faithful members of the group. And this applies even in this case. As you can see, this is a situation where Caleb was not only had a bunch of young people living together in official housing run by the Institute, but also they were paying for it. So the Institute wasn't providing them anything. The Institute was only providing them the promises of a coming revolution, the promises of change. That is predatory. That is disgustingly predatory. Promising that you'll solve someone's problems, promising that you'll take care of someone while making them pay your bills is disgusting. Let's continue. When I lost my math tutoring job, Caleb still expected me to continue financially supporting the JBV while I still had to continue to pay for my student loans, which meant I desperately needed another source of income. Caleb expected me to spend even more time canvassing for the JBVs after I lost my job, though, because he thought canvassing was a sufficient way of making money for myself and the organization. Notice that, for myself and the organization. How convenient. Interesting that. I could have canvassed less so I could get another job, or he could have stopped asking me to pay a third of the rent since it seemed unnecessary before I started living there. But part of what Caleb wanted was for me to spend less time away from him and CPI, giving basically every spare second I had to being a dutiful member of the group. That's literally exactly what I was talking about. That right there is the exact behavior. The day after I lost my job at the math tutoring company, I told Caleb I wanted to try to at least find another part-time work. However, his reaction to that suggestion made it very clear he didn't even see it as an option. He told me that I couldn't have 1 foot in living biologically and 1 foot in the revolution. Holy fucking shit. Holy shit. That right there. 1 foot living biologically and 1 foot in the revolution. This is the type of shit that I'm talking about, where instead of ever actually addressing the problems at hand, instead it's deferred onto spiritual or political gesturing. You must simply devote more. You must simply devote more to the cause. Also ridiculous. Ridiculous to believe that a revolution, which is made up of biological people, that you can neglect the biologically living people. This right here says you are supposed to die for my organization. That's what it says. Don't worry about yourself. Fight for something bigger, even if it hurts. Let's continue. This quote, which was part of a much longer lecture he gave about how I needed to devote even more time to our political work, if I truly considered myself serious about it, was very hurtful, considering I had just given up my job for Caleb and his organization. Yet just treating the Center for Political Innovation as the main aspect of my life simply wasn't enough for him. Caleb made it clear that if I really cared about him and my other comrades, CPI would have to become my life. Member 2, we should talk later, but basically it all gets down to this. You are in a situation where you know your housing and food will be taken care of. You will not be left out to dry. Obviously false. You're not being taken care of if you're paying rent. If you're paying rent, you're not being taken care of. They're helping to take care of you, Caleb. However, you have some rather unrealistic expectations about other stuff you insist is absolutely needed. Your life is your life. Your decisions are your decisions. Well, we see that's clearly not the case. Notice this, though. Notice that they'll say things like this, but the truth is you don't have anywhere to go. Your life is your life, but you don't have another choice. If you leave, you're fucked. We know you're fucked. In fact, Caleb made sure that this member would be fucked if they tried to leave. You need to figure out how dedicated you are to communism. And if you are not ready to leave your old life behind or not, literal Christian wording here, leave your old life behind. You have 1 foot in living biologically and 1 foot in the revolution, and that's a very, very hard way to live. I can help you and be your friend, but I cannot solve all of your problems. I cannot make hard choices for you. Oh, and then he gives, this is a Bible quote? This is a Bible quote, and then he inserts a literal Bible quote. Do not suppose that I have come to bring peace to the earth. This is Jesus. I did not come to bring peace, but a sword. For I have come to turn a man against his father, a daughter against her mother, a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. A man's enemies will be the members of his own household. Anyone who loves their father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. Anyone who loves their son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. And whoever does not take up their cross and follow me is not worthy of me. Whoever finds their life will lose it, and whoever loses their life for my sake will find it. Anyone who welcomes you welcomes me, and anyone who welcomes me welcomes the one who sent me. Whoever welcomes a prophet as a prophet will receive a prophet's reward, and whoever welcomes a righteous person as a righteous person will receive a righteous person's reward. And if anyone gives even a cup of cold water to one of these little ones who is my disciple, truly I tell you that person will not lose their reward. This is Caleb Maupin literally self-inserting as Jesus. Talk about, this is a literal God complex. It can't get more obvious than this. Bringing the jacket. See you at Wendy's at 1 p.m. Spent a long time thinking about you last night. I know these are very hard times for you. Sorry, I'm probably just overthinking all this. I just care about you a lot. Spent a long time in prayer. Talk to you soon. And here's their response. I do understand what you're saying, although with all due respect, I think there are certain issues you've had the privilege of not having to deal with, and those pressures are something I'm more than happy to take care of on my own. The reality of it is that I can't just abandon my family. I don't have the privilege of doing that because I've been their rock for my entire life, and they can't do certain things without me. I know it's probably difficult to deal with me having other obligations, but they're obligations, not choices. There are certain things in my life that aren't optional, and I'm sorry that they interfere with my communist activism. Concerning. If I had the option of forgetting them or leaving them behind, trust me, I would. It would make my life a whole lot easier. I'm not asking you to abandon your family. We can talk later. There are some things I simply cannot offer you. I understand. We'll talk later. Therefore, I ended up doing sex work so I could make enough to support our household and pay off my debts while still having enough time to canvass full-time for the JBVs. I distinctly remember telling Caleb that it seemed like sex work was my only way out of this delicate financial situation. His response was simply that he respects my decision. I'm going to take a small pause to bring one thing up, okay? I just want to bring one real quick thing up, okay? This is a clip from Caleb Maupin's social media, which is now deleted. As you can see, he's got his famous Russia state-affiliated media tag. This is him talking about sex work. It shouldn't be illegal and no one should be punished for it, but it goes against my beliefs as a Christian. Sexual behavior should be carefully controlled, in my opinion. Part of the reason for widespread depression and chaos in our society is people reducing sex to being casual. Just in case anybody, you know, was worried about that part. So we have an incredible level of hypocrisy involved here, of course, but let's talk about this. Yes, Melodic One, you bring up a great point. I was about to say, there is nothing inherently wrong with sex work, not even a little bit. I know a lot of sex workers. I have done certain types of sex work in the past, not full service sex work or anything like that. I did some, it's a long story, but anyway, in the past, I know many people who have. Sometimes it can be very fulfilling. It can be very freeing. However, that is not always true. It is possible to find yourself with no other option than sex work. In fact, this has been greatly discussed, interestingly, discussed in communist circles about how people can find themselves with no other option than to sell their body even when they don't want to, even when it's not something that fulfills them, even when it's something they find personally distasteful. And as you can see, this person was not exactly excited about doing sex work. They felt like they had no other option, and it appears that that's true. They lost their job, so they lost their job on bad terms, which, as you all know, right now it's pretty hard to get a job in general, but especially if you can't provide a recommendation from your former work, that can make it impossible to get work. And this person was being squeezed for money by Caleb Maupin. So Caleb Maupin essentially created a circumstance where this person either had to become even more involved in the cult, or they had to go do sex work and also still get more involved in the cult. This is highly coercive. This is a highly coercive situation. There is nothing good or positive about this type of sex work, okay? Being forced into sex work is a very bad thing. Let us continue. In retrospect, it seems like the real reason Caleb didn't mind me doing sex work while I was living in CPI's New Jersey housing is because he probably wanted to become one of my clients. Oh my God. For what it's worth, after I left the JBV house, he eventually did become a client of mine. Holy fucking shit. Caleb kicked me out of the John Brown Volunteers in the beginning of November 2021 after I relapsed on heroin in late October. At that point, I took some time away from the organization, only attended a few smaller events, and stayed at my fiance's apartment to focus on my recovery and getting clean again. While by that time I had started my own math tutoring business and I had my own students, I was still doing sex work as a side hustle to supplement my income because I didn't have enough students to cover the revenue I'd lost once I stopped canvassing and had to pay my own utilities again. In December 2021, Caleb asked me to replace his former dominatrix, Miss Lucy. I agreed to do so for $250 per session because I did not need the money, and I felt like if I said no, I'd be even more isolated from the rest of CPI than I already was as a result of my relapse. By that time in mid-December, I was already clean again, which Caleb insisted upon in order for us to even see each other, yet he was still apparently lying to the rest of CPI that I was continuing to be in the midst of my drug addiction. Holy fucking shit! So, hold on, let's restructure this. Can we just make sure that we're structuring this out? So, Caleb Maupin was the direct cause of this person losing their job, which meant they could which meant that they fell onto bad terms with their family. After they fell onto bad terms with their family, Caleb pressured them to get more and more involved in the organization, doing work for him for extremely paltry pay so that they could pay him for rent, which they relied upon because they lived there and no longer were on good terms with their family because of the shit that Caleb Maupin himself caused. Then, after they started doing sex work out of necessity, Caleb Maupin approached them, offering money for sexual services while simultaneously telling the rest of the cult that they were still basically, while they were telling the rest of the cult that they were still addicted to drugs and not doing well. That is a phenomenal level of social control and manipulation. That is a deep, deep level of social control and manipulation. That is just as culty as it can possibly get. Genuinely disgusting. Let's continue. He did this while saying to my face that he didn't want me going to CPI events or his birthday party so I didn't run into his wife, Meches, because he thought I would make things awkward. I later learned from other CPI members that this was a common tactic of his, isolating someone from the group through rumors and hearsay in order to make sure I didn't interact with other CPI members in case I decided to tell them about our arrangement. Truth be told, you mean, when they say arrangement here, they mean extortion. Caleb was extorting this young person for sex. Caleb was deeply extorting this young person for sex. Truth be told, I was terribly afraid of anyone else in the organization finding out I was doing this with him. I was afraid if I told anyone, they wouldn't believe me, and if he told one, I would be shunned and ostracized, which, as it turns out, was a rational fear because that's exactly what happened. I saw Caleb as his dominant a few times in December 2021. He essentially paid me to reenact his childhood corporal punishment as a fatherly figure to discipline him. Included in this arrangement, he was the understanding that he'd also compensate me for the several hours he spent sexting me about his kink when we weren't seeing each other in person. He texted me so often I eventually had to ask him to stop because I kept getting notifications from his sexually explicit messages while I was trying to teach my students. However, he only ever paid me for our in-person meetings and never even mentioned billing for my texting labor again, despite our original first agreement. After a couple of months of constant communications and a few punishment sessions, he abruptly stopped speaking to me, acting as if I suddenly didn't exist. I was very confused and hurt by this because I truly thought that by agreeing to do sex work for him, I had won his good graces so we could continue to be friends. I knew he didn't want me in the group afterwards, but I thought at the time that he at least appreciated my contributions thus far and respected me as a person. This is not healthy kink. This is not healthy BDSM. This is nothing of the sort. What you have here is a situation of extortion where a young person was exploited by a Russian propagandist specifically for his own sexual gratification. And also, he didn't even pay this person. He didn't even pay for the things he was going to. This is just sexual assault. This is just sexual exploitation. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about this. Think you can hold me accountable for my feelings about that book? Let's see. Let's try and see if we can get this a little bit bigger. Here, I'm gonna open this up. Here we go. Think you can hold me accountable for my feelings about that book? Absolutely. We'll moderate your detention assignment. You have to write, I must accept my punishment. I need your discipline to grow and be safe 100 times. What is it? That is what you are going to say to me when I ask, why are you being punished, Caleb? If you get that answer wrong, then you clearly haven't learned that lesson and you'll be punished even more. Thank you, member 2. Can you remind me why the boatmaster needed to spank the last duck every day? To keep himself from getting lost and hurting himself. The one time he decides to avoid his punishment, he is isolated from his family and almost killed. If the boatmaster doesn't spank the duck will be like a sailboat without a rudder, directionless, alone, and with nowhere to go. Loved. Oh, okay, so then he loved this thing. The boatmaster was keeping the ducks safe, encouraging them to hurry back. That hard spank with the stick was given in love. I'm so sorry for questioning it, member 2. I know I need to get punished. You must be very disappointed in me. If you were my teacher, I would get sent for the paddle for this? Yes, you would. Not because I'm angry with you, but because, like Ping, you still haven't learned why you needed an authority to guide you with a firm hand. You are smart enough to understand these things, so I have very high expectations of you. No, it's too late. I can't. You guys imagine the joke. I'm gonna keep the jokes out of this section. I'll make jokes later, okay? Those expectations help you become better, and my discipline helps you meet those expectations. Understood? I need to get a spanking for my little attitude problem. You should probably double the lines I need to write. You'll be getting double the spankings instead. I'm a proponent of learning while doing. Maybe if you experience Ping's punishment for yourself, you'll lose your attitude. Is it going to hurt to sit down after? Yes, it will, but you will still have to sit up straight and deal with the pain. Remember that pain every time you think of questioning my authority. If I see you slouching or changing your posture because you're in pain after I spank you, you'll just get paddled instead. Disrespecting that book is kind of like disrespecting you. I must respect authority and discipline, says Caleb. Good posture is essential to good health and productivity. Exactly. Disrespecting any form of authority and discipline is disrespecting me, and I am not forgiving or kind when I am disrespected. My dad should have put me over his knee more often, taught me not to have this disrespectful attitude. You should spank me really hard. Am I gonna have to eat soap? First of all, member 2 is doing a lot of work. Just so that you all know, I just want to say from somebody who is a dom, from somebody who does that type of stuff, this person's putting in a lot of work. That's some fucking quality sexting. That's a lot of work going into that, by the way. And I know that might sound silly, but I want to be clear. They were told They were told they were going to be paid for this. They were already being exploited because Caleb Maupin had put them in a position where they had no other choice, but they also were doing good work. This is high detailed. This is very attentive. This is incredibly detailed work. Unfortunately, I was wrong. The reason why he stopped speaking to me was apparently because another group member came forward with her own allegations against him, and he assumed that I was the one who had leaked it. Even though he'd already told other CPI members that I was a drug addict who couldn't participate in group events before this, after member 1 came forward, he began telling people I was dangerous and two-faced. A dangerous individual, so that no one would believe the allegations. Of course, from my perspective, I had done everything he'd asked me to do and kept our secret to protect myself. So when he ghosted me suddenly in the middle of January, I felt completely betrayed. Betrayed again. This is so disgusting. Here's the proof of this. She's rather two-faced. Member 2? Yes, member 2. We have flirt texted many times, always consensual. A lie. We know there is... Let me be 100% clear. One more time. Let me be 100% clear. That is not consensual. It is not consensual to exploit someone, to put someone in a position where they have no choice but to do sex work for you. That is not consent. Even if they say, yes, they don't have any other choice. That's not consensual. Isn't she a part of CPI now? As far as I know, she never told me there was any problem. I'm going to pretend this never happened and cut her off. Strange. We flirt texted on Wednesday and it was a lot more than verbal abuse. This is dumb shit. Nonetheless, I still publicly supported Caleb in CPI. To this day, I haven't said a single disparaging thing about Caleb in public. To the contrary, throughout these past few years, I often defended Caleb against online attacks on his character, even if they came from other principled communists. Oh God. The last straw for me, what finally forced me to stop publicly aligning myself with Caleb once and for all, was his response to Yankee Tanky, aka Joey's video exposing another CPI member, Keaton's inappropriate behaviors within the group. Caleb sent me the link to that video after weeks of completely ignoring me, in the hopes that I would ask Joey to take the video down, since many of the allegations against Keaton included intimate details of my personal life. Holy shit! While I did agree with Caleb that Joey had no right to expose my own personal life like that without my own consent, he did keep me anonymous while discussing what happened. And I myself had complained to Caleb about many of Keaton's actions as they were happening while we were still living in the JBV house. But Caleb's response was always to dismiss my concerns or reassure me that he would talk to Keaton. That means Caleb was covering for Keaton. When I reminded Caleb about the truth of what Joey was saying and how I'd made these complaints to Caleb myself, he lashed out at me, accusing me of being obsessed with Keaton and demanding to know why I was so preoccupied with a former fling from last summer. This temper tantrum of his and the subsequent attacks on my character throughout that conversation was when I decided enough was enough. Clearly, my dedication to socialism and CPI throughout the years and loyalty to Caleb was no longer relevant. These incidents, as well as some conversations I had later with other former members of CPI, have me fully convinced that Caleb Maupin is not qualified to lead any political organization, period. If he could callously abuse, manipulate, disregard, and shun a determined group member and close friend after almost half a decade of loyal service, there's no telling what else he's capable of. So this last bit is an absolute fucking layer cake of exploitation. So Yankee Tanky, aka Joey, did a video which exposed portions of member two's private life without consent. They never checked with the victim. That is fucking bad. Do not do that. But secondly, Caleb, after isolating member two, leaving member two, and also, despite promising, we have your back, we're gonna protect you and take care of you, Caleb isolated member two by lying about drugs while exploiting member two sexually, and then tried to pressure member two to go and get the video taken down that was exposing CPI's disgusting problem with rape and sexual abuse. So that is the end of member two's statement. Now we are going to read the statement by member number one, okay? So member number two, to summarize just real quick so that we keep all of this orderly as best as possible. To summarize member number two joined the organization when they were just out of high school at age 19. They were immediately brought under Caleb Maupin's wing to a level of intimacy that I would say is quite concerning on its own, though not necessarily incriminating. They were taken out to dinner by themselves on a regular basis. They very soon were invited to move in with Caleb Maupin's organization, and then very shortly after, they began to be exploited for rent and other things. After Caleb Maupin directly caused member number two to lose their job. Caleb Maupin then pressured them into doing more work for the organization in order to maintain making rent, which was being paid to Caleb Maupin, just so that we are reminded. So Caleb Maupin lost them their income and then proceeded to continue to ask them for rent, forcing them ultimately to turn to sex work in order to make rent so they would have a place to live, so they could continue trying to make their way in life. Caleb Maupin employed religious and revolutionary promises and terminology in order to calm very, very real fears and to admonish this person for their best behavior, and then later, after forcing them into sex work, propositioned them to give them money for sex, fully knowing that he had been responsible for them losing their job and for forcing them out of their previous living situation. This is a disgustingly, scathingly detailed indictment of Caleb Maupin and all of his doings. That's the summary of member number two. We are now going to read the statement of member number one. All right, let us go. Section 2B, member one statement. As I originally intended to keep this information to myself for the rest of my life, I would like to ensure that my right to privacy is respected. Knowing Caleb's behavior towards the youth has only deteriorated over the years, I feel the need to share my story in order to provide insight into how these issues with Caleb have evolved over time. In September 2017, I was a 22-year-old woman who found out about SYNA, which is his other organization, Socialist Youth of North America, I think is what it's called. I may be getting the name slightly wrong. Thank you, Trans Replicant, I appreciate that. About SYNA through a mutual friend who was also engaged in political activism. My personal interest in foreign relations and history led me to join a group that prides itself on intellectual discourse and on educating ourselves and others about the human rights we all deserve. I felt so engaged that I even included SYNA on my resume, listing that I helped with organizing events related to labor history, workers' rights, and that some of our members did food drives and laundry drives. We all noticed that Caleb was an unofficial leader of the group. He was 29 at the time, had a consistent income, and was willing to spend his income on event space, whereas we were younger and without the ability to spend much of our incomes on event space and organizing. Caleb was SYNA's de facto leader, and all decisions would need his approval. Anyone who made their own decisions regarding activism without his knowledge or approval could face his judgment, criticism, and then gossip. Notice that? Notice how this works? That Caleb hides behind plausible deniability and uses hearsay and gossip to socially manipulate people out of the in-group, really messed up. When I got a new side job that involved teaching in 2018, Caleb began to mention his rough childhood to me more and more often. During one-on-one conversations, he would mention different stories, all tying back to these main points. He always found it hard to make friends, he was bullied badly, and he was physically abused growing up. Caleb spoke more often about being spanked at school, and then finally made it clear that he gets sexual gratification from being spanked now as an adult, and sees a dominatrix twice a month with his wife's permission. I thought it was kind of strange that Caleb was telling me all of this, but I figured he was trying to be friendly and jovial, the way some friends do talk about sex after all. Plus, he mentioned how much of a struggle it always was for him to make friends. It was weird to me because I thought our political professional friendship at SYNA was fine the way that it was. I kept defaulting to having empathy for his rough situation and his self-proclaimed social awkwardness. Another thing that Caleb mentioned to me at some point in 2018 was that he would ask women if they were ever spanked as a child, and he liked to talk to women about their experiences and share his own childhood spanking memories. Caleb told me he knows this is bad, but that he would take what they shared with him and masturbate about them being spanked. Not them being spanked as a child, but he would just masturbate to the whole idea of them expressing their feelings on being spanked and punished. I was really shocked and disgusted that he had told me this. There's a lot of layers going on here. Talking to somebody on its face about something that is sexually interesting to you is not in and of itself necessarily a bad thing. But if you continually push this stuff on other people, and also if you admit to intentionally going out of your way to force other people to unknowingly have conversations with you, which you later masturbate to, and you're telling somebody about this as well, that is a level of involving multiple people with your private affairs that is not acceptable. This is not healthy kink. This is not healthy BDSM. This is not consensual. You understand? Let's continue. I was still an active SYNA member attending and organizing events. I never knew how to ask him to stop bringing up his fetish without there being any consequences. There's another example. What we see now is that there's no actual way that Caleb made it clear from his behaviors that there would be repercussions if you asked him to stop doing things. Once again, that is not consensual. If you are consistently essentially holding someone hostage so that you can get off to telling them about things, so you can get off to directly using them as a sexual object, that's not okay. That's not consensual. Again, in and of itself, there's nothing wrong about talking to other people, other adults about sex, but you have to respect boundaries. And if you're regularly punishing and what's the word? Retaliating against people who tell you they don't want to talk about sex with you, you are violating their consent. Also, I wanted to maintain empathy for him constantly bashing himself for being so socially awkward. Additionally, everyone in SYNA who knew Caleb knows that he creates gossip between comrades and will privately tell one comrade a lot of nasty and untrue things about another. With the way he made this gossip and wanted everything centered around his input and approval, we hardly ever spoke to each other outside of Caleb's earshot. We certainly didn't dislike each other, but he would tell us generally unsavory things about each other that we would shrug off. This is another thing that cult abusers tend to do. They tend to instill distrust among the younger members of an organization so that the only people who are trustworthy is the leader. You understand how that works? It's a tactic. It's a tactic that works, unfortunately. It's a tactic that works because if you don't know who you can talk to safely, there's only one person you can talk to safely. For example, he would tell us that one Sina member is very spoiled and is supposedly a whiny baby that lives off of money from their parents. This was an 18 to 20-year-old member at the time. Then there were 2 other members where Caleb's negative gossip on them to me was asking me if I think that they're gay on multiple occasions. And Caleb would specifically point out things about what they do or what they wear that make them seem gay. Damn, you think Caleb Maupin has a problem with gay people? So these were not inherently bad traits at all about these people, but we just all had this mutual understanding that speaking to each other or doing things without Caleb is a waste of time, since he planted negative ideas about us in each other's heads, and we can't really make any group decisions without him. Anyways, because of the way the group was structured. So this contributed to my fear of ever telling him to knock off the sexual conversations and sexual oversharing. I didn't want to get kicked out or have any drama created about me to tarnish my image, the way I would see him constantly complain about other members to me. At that point, Caleb would say that I was very special and trustworthy and hardworking, and the other Sina members were supposedly not as hardworking or present as I was. Between February 19 and April 2019, Caleb began mentioning the idea of a social media coach. Caleb started to increase how often he would bring up the social media coach idea. He wanted to find a woman who would text him throughout the week to check in on him and make sure to shame and admonish him if he wasn't reaching his goals in growing his following online. Then the social media coach would meet up with him and spank his rear end at the end of the week, which he would pay for. I kept once again trying deflecting measures, like I would tell him to check out an app called Seeking Arrangements, where he can create a profile and find someone to charter up this sexual financial agreement with. I wasn't exactly uncomfortable at that point because I knew I could always reject any advance, but it was also honestly starting to get annoying, and if he wanted his fix so badly, he needed to go somewhere and find it and stop talking to me about it all the time. Considering the fact that I was a member of Sina and therefore first and foremost a comrade and activist, which is reasonable. Again, Caleb was simultaneously telling me I was such a kind and special friend and such a hardworking Sina member. I felt empathy for how he said he felt like an outcast and how, growing up, how I'm finally a great friend that he has that he trusts, and also how disappointed he is in the other Sina members compared to myself. I was worried if I clearly told him to stop talking about sexual fantasies and his need of prostitutes, I wouldn't be able to be in Sina anymore or having working friendship with him anymore. Something clicked in my head on April 17th, 2019, when he wrote in a message that he will get in touch with his old roommate about this social media coach idea. Here he is at the top of this text archive, talking about getting spanked. Right. And I know there are other things too, like financial domination and stuff, but yeah, I am not passionate about it. So in the end, I feel like I would be wasting their time and money, and I would go through a lot of effort for something that makes me feel gross, because I had imagined most clients are not young or attractive. So this is them very, very casually and very reasonably explicitly stating that this makes them feel gross. They don't want to talk about it, but he keeps talking about it. And clearly this is not the first time they've brought it up. My old roommate blank. She seemed interested in some of this. I'm going to casually bring up the social media discipline thing when I see her. Not directly ask her, just casually, and see how she reacts. Yeah, I guess nothing to lose. I can't do that for you, just so you know, only because you have mentioned it to me. Lol, 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 lol. I wasn't propositioning you. Don't worry. We're comrades. I don't bring this stuff into politics. Well, we know that's a fucking lie. He said he would talk about this idea to the roommate and see if she's interested in being his social media coach. My response to that information was to take my chance and finally make it clear I will never be interested in engaging in acts of prostitution for Caleb. To me, I believe that he was hoping I would do exactly what he had hoped would happen with his old roommate. He was talking about this idea to me often, the way he said he would talk about it to the old roommate in the hopes that she responds to the idea in a positive way. This conversation on April 17th ended nicely with him apologizing and complimenting me, complimenting my contributions to Sina and how well I carry myself, heavily complimenting my personal financial career successes. Notice this? Any pushback is met both with secret retaliation and public love bombing. If you express any doubt, you get love bombed until you shut the hell up about it, and then you're slowly pushed out. So fucked up. As a side note, I was doing very well for myself in 2019. I had a great job, I had a vibrant social life and hobbies. I worked very hard at both my regular job and in Sina, and Caleb knew all of this and complimented me very often for it. This is important for me to mention due to the way that Caleb has chosen to slander my image reputation to other comrades. This conversation on April 17th was the first and final time I ever made it clear that I was uninterested in any prostitution and sexual involvement with Caleb. That's very clear. Our conversations between April 17 onward then did focus more on politics, but he would still mention his sexual things to me, like messaging me on April 22nd, only mere days later, that he is getting ready to go meet his dominatrix to get spanked. I ignored the comment and continued trying to keep our conversations intellectual, jovial, and respectful. Dude, take a hint. Around this time, there were offers to go on an all-expenses-paid trip to Venezuela to promote friendship between America and Venezuela and to protest against Juan Guaido's presidency, paid for by Venezuelan political groups. Though this sounded like an alluring offer since it was an all-expenses-paid trip, the relations between America and Venezuela were particularly tense in April and May, due to Juan Guaido's insertion as president of Venezuela. At that time, Venezuelan officials made threats to shut off power at the U.S. Embassy, and American officials began plans to pull diplomats out of Venezuela. I didn't see why I should be pressured to take this free trip to Venezuela to protest against Guaido, therefore protesting against America, and risk consequences during my time there or upon my return to America. This idea seemed very risky and out of touch for Caleb to be suggesting. Usually our activism was within New York City or America. We were the students and youth for a new America. And Caleb was usually the first person to speak up loudly about us making sure we behave cordial and safe outside and online. For example, making sure we never talk about guns or promoting violence, and just always making sure that we only promote safe and legal forms of freedom of speech. So this seemed very out of character that Caleb felt insistent that I needed to drop my work and take a trip to Venezuela to condemn America, and that I shouldn't care about any repercussions that could have on my return back to America. Caleb's insistence that I go to Venezuela to condemn America came to a head on May 1st of 2019, where at 1 a.m. he sent me a message asking me why I and other SINA members don't have as much drive as him. He explained that he is so accomplished and has done so many risky political acts throughout his life, and now he has a comfortable job, which is why he couldn't go to Venezuela, but it was really disappointing that none of us would go to Venezuela. In my head, this was such a joke. He stated he can't go to Venezuela because he currently has a comfortable job, and he wants us all to drop whatever we're doing and go there in such a tense political climate during May 2019. I told him that I had to wake up early in the morning for work and that he needs to leave me alone. So here's Caleb mopping again. Write articles and travel the world and be a big communist revolutionary leader, and the whole world has done everything to block me from doing that. I sold my blood plasma. I got mistreated for years in WWP, and now I have a nice, comfortable job. I'm well known, comparatively speaking. I don't get it. Here, I'm practically begging people to do what I have fought to do my whole life. The door is wide open, and people don't want it. Why did I have to fight so hard to do what other people don't even care enough to do? My deepest apologies. I can't speak for others, and I've already explained I care about my personal safety. It's not an issue of apologizing. You didn't do anything wrong. You just aren't like me. I know I didn't do anything wrong. All right, then. Where are people like me? If anyone knows Caleb, you know that he is extremely persistent, pushy, and wants to isolate you, and he wants to take huge risks with your employment, family relationships to show your devotion and commitment to his group. This is another cult tactic. Okay, so let me explain something. Another commonly recognized tactic of cults is what are essentially tests. It's tests of faith is the way that they're usually referred to. Tests of loyalty is another term. It's literally, the idea is asking you to do something very risky where if you don't do it, You prove yourself as unfaithful, and if you do it, well, it enriches the leader. It enriches the organization, and they get to go, well, look at that. You did what we told you to do. And of course, as you can see, there's a lot of pressure involved in this. It's literally testing people to find out which ones will go the furthest. He wants you to take huge risks with your employment and family relationships to show your devotion and commitment to his group, and that he sends text message essays about why you're wrong and bad. After 30 minutes after I told him to leave me alone and let me sleep, my phone started buzzing with his incoming texts rapid fire. What ensued next was a 2-hour back and forth argument where he tried out every manipulation tactic to try to tell me why I'm wrong for not going to Venezuela, and adding in new argument components, such as accusing me of being the one who initiated the argument. He was clearly the one who initiated the argument, while I was the one asking him to stop and let me sleep for work. Claiming that I did this to feel superior to him because I supposedly thought he was a freak, because I'm a normie and I'm scared of the US Embassy in Venezuela closing, so I should never have gotten involved with Sina in the first place, which to me is an immediate red flag about his isolating behavior. He should not want his members to ever feel unsafe or unprotected, yet he keeps making people feel complimented for taking huge risks to their safety, employment, or family relationships. Doe says, yeah, this is such bullshit. The way he frames it about himself really shows how empty his politics are. If you gave half a shit about other people, the thought, why did I fight for the rights, protection, and liberation of other people if you won't do this, would never cross your mind. Yeah, it's surprising, huh? Exactly. Here's some more texts. If you're scared of being put on a list, you really should stay the fuck away from me. It's pathetic, after all the time and money I've contributed to Sina, that this is what you chose to start your attack on me over. It was not an attack on you. You have lulled me into thinking you are someone I can whine to you about my problems with. You gained my trust. You got me to open up to you. Well, you included me in your problems, which I don't support, so I was opening up. Jesus Christ. Holy shit. I maintained my position during our entire argument. I wanted him to apologize for being disrespectful to me and for pressuring me to engage in a situation I felt unsafe about, that he himself was unwilling to do himself because of the comfortable job. The 2-hour conversation kept going. Also at that point, he owed me $157, which I had spotted him because he was always running out of money. I didn't want to get blocked by him before getting my $157 back. I also was nervous to silence or turn off my phone because of how dramatically he twists stories about people. I felt like I wanted this argument to remain between only Caleb and I that evening and to get resolved by us only, ideally, without him creating gossip and lies about me to other people over this. I was afraid if I truly did cut off our argument and go to sleep before getting him to stop on his own accord, I'd wake up in the morning to hundreds of messages or multiple people who had only heard Caleb's versions of events asking me why I was so horrible to Caleb, and a whole new messy issue of twisted gossip and drama. This is a cult! This is a fucking cult! There is no ifs, ands, or buts about this. Our argument goes in circles, with me resisting all of his manipulation attempts and him baiting me to try to criticize or call him names until 3 a.m. After this May 1st argument, I shared a PDF file of the screenshots between Caleb in the Sina Facebook message group chat. The PDF file contained the entire 2-hour text argument because I know Caleb creates drama and makes lies to suit himself, so I included the entire argument so no one could ever accuse me of posting anything out of context. At the time when I shared the PDF in the Sino chat, I told everyone this is how Caleb speaks to me personally, and I really don't like being treated this way. At the time, no one had my back, no one cared to reach out, and Caleb kicked me out of the chat group and told me that sharing screenshots of our personal conversation was wrong to do. And he once again accused me of luring him into trusting me and that I betrayed him by posting the PDF of the argument. Everyone in the chat was super confused about what the PDF even meant. They were right to be confused. It happened out of nowhere at 1 a.m. And even by showing all of the screenshots, it looked so weird why Caleb was doing this to me out of nowhere, being upset with me for not going to Venezuela in May 2019, when usually he had spoken very highly of me to some other members, and other members respected me as a Sina group member. It was uncharacteristic for Caleb to be so mad at me. So when I got no response from anyone in the Sina group chat, this is when I realized that everyone in the group is currently in denial and is also a victim themselves. Yikes. I was then removed from the Sina chats, and since Caleb was the ringleader of everything, it was impossible for me to ever be able to come to events or continue to help out like I used to. When I would get removed from chats, other members would try to add me back, but since Caleb was ignoring my presence, it felt useless or hopeless for me to go any further in Sina. I feel like on April 17th, when I shot down any notion of ever prostituting myself for Caleb, I think he tried to act nice and normal for a bit, and then on May 1, created a strange argument over false pretenses to try to rile me up and get me pushed out. That would match with member 2's story. Isn't that curious? Isn't that fucking curious? It turns out that after I got removed, he still made up lies to discredit me. Other Sina members were confused as to why I wasn't in the group anymore. I was helpful and respected, and everyone was happy to have my contributions and to have me as a member. Caleb created disparaging remarks that I couldn't be a part of Sina anymore and could no longer attend group Sina functions because I was supposedly an alcoholic all of a sudden. This parallels the situation I mentioned before, where Caleb would keep gossiping about if other Sina members were secretly gay based on what they wear or how another member is spoiled. This is also why I mentioned earlier in this statement that in 2019 I had a great job, and how in our final argument, Caleb was the one who had still owed me $157. So I found out in 2022 that Caleb told different Sina CPI members different slanderous versions about me. He told some people that I quit Sina because I was an alcoholic. He told other people I couldn't keep up with Sina obligations due to my alcoholism, but that I'm welcome to come back. Established Sina members knew this was weird but didn't question it. And new Sina members didn't know who I was and didn't question it. For the record, I have never had a drinking problem. When I was 23 in 2019, I had fun drinking socially with my friends. Caleb has an alcohol allergy and cannot drink any alcohol, and in addition to his gossipy, judgmental lifestyle, I think he has a bad perception on what is or isn't a normal amount of alcohol to consume. I have never been a daily drinker. In 2019, I would probably average about 4 to 5 alcoholic drinks on a Friday or Saturday night if I went out with friends, and only in a scene where drinking is socially acceptable, like a bar, restaurant, or music venue. Then about 2 to 3 drinks if I met a friend, such as Caleb, during the work week. I stick to the general one drink per hour rule, and in general, I intrinsically value sobriety and alcohol moderation. Me, my family, and my closest people who know me would not at all characterize me as having an issue with alcoholism, let alone an alcoholism issue that would lead me to abandon my political activism. I'm explaining this in such great detail because I and other Sina members 100% believe that this was a slanderous, libelous tactic to detract from the fact that I had turned down money for sex with Caleb Maupin. I think Caleb has devoted far too much time talking about his sexual life and gossiping about slandering comrades. To me, it's very concerning, and I was partly silent from 2019 until now because I was hoping that Caleb would just get the help he needs. I have never wanted to cancel Caleb or anyone. I always hoped Caleb would learn from his mistakes and improve himself without ever needing a public call out to stop him from hurting any more young people. Unfortunately, as much as I had hoped Caleb would improve, I realize he has only become much worse than he was to me in 2019. In March 2019, I noticed a newer member who was 19 years old began to get favored by Caleb, and something in my head started to feel worried that this innocent person might be getting asked questions about if they've ever been spanked. This member had vaguely mentioned stressful moments with their parents during group meetings, which scared me to wonder if this could have Caleb make that connection to his spanking domination fetish, or that they might potentially get taken advantage of sexually by Caleb. This member I am speaking of is member number 2. This member seemed so excited to be in Sina and to be Caleb's friend, and I really didn't know what to do. I was afraid of being accused of making false accusations or starting drama, if I were to preemptively warn this member before anything bad actually ever happened. I ended up never warning this member, never speaking to this member one-on-one, and it wasn't until 2022 that I found out the true extent of exploitation and prostitution that Caleb had put this young and innocent person through. Caleb ended up prostituting this person while they were homeless, and while Caleb told them repeatedly to not get a regular day job. Caleb told this person to not get a regular day job because that isn't what committed revolutionaries do. However, Caleb had no problem paying them for his sexual gratification. I live with that guilt. I can't believe I never warned that member back then when I had the chance in 2019. It would have seemed crazy if I had warned them. I urge all young members of CPI to question everything and everyone. Do your due diligence. Don't naively trust people just because they call themselves an activist or comrade. Guys, Don't naively trust people just because they call themselves an activist or a comrade. This is why you have to be very careful around people who cloak themselves in revolutionary rhetoric, especially if they're also asking for something that benefits them from you. This is the same exact rule that you would apply to a manipulative and abusive religious group. If someone is asking you for something, you should think about what you are gonna get from it. You should think about why they are asking you for that thing, and never, whether it's patriotism, whether it's spiritualism, whether it's any of those things, never let those lofty words be the only reason you're doing something. Because chances are, if somebody has to tell you that the reason you need to go and make money for them by prostituting yourself is because of some lofty thing like the revolution, you're in a cult. Okay? And yes, it is impossible to ignore the fact that most tanky organizations, most of these Marxist-Leninist, highly centralized organizations do this exact same thing and also deal with the exact same problems. There's a number of other organizations that have unfolded exactly like Caleb Maupin and his bullshit organizations. After all, it seems very likely that Caleb Maupin, in fact, I believe he's mentioned this. I'm not 100% sure on that citation, so don't hold me to that one. But it is very obvious, at least in the structure, that Caleb Maupin took inspiration from other groups, like Bob Avakian's Revolutionary Communists. We are finishing this portion. Don't naively trust people just because they call themselves an activist or comrade. Do not be afraid to question Caleb's credentials. Does Caleb have experience in accounting, nonprofit accounting, or positive youth development? Caleb keeps working around young people. Has he taken precautions to create strict boundaries with minors and young adults? Has he been formally trained in how to work with high school or college freshman-age students? Does Caleb even see the value in taking a step back from CPI in order to learn more about how to teach youth appropriately and work on himself? This is an opportunity for people to prove that if they are a true comrade or not. I was forced out of Sina because I did not want to be Caleb's prostitute. I have provided the background and details, and I have allowed Sina members to hold my phone and look through my messages with Caleb. Will you take the side of the predators who wish to silence me, who continue to further break the law by creating libel and slander about me, who wish to intimidate victims into silence, or will you actually be a comrade and support injustice everywhere, even if it gives you cognitive dissonance? I think they meant and fight injustice everywhere, not support injustice everywhere, though that's an odd, slick slip of the tongue. So now we enter section 3, Caleb Maupin's generally abusive and exploitative behavior. 3A, Keaton Manfield's statement. On July 16th, 2021, when I was 18 years old, I left rural Illinois for NYC after a phone call from Caleb Maupin asking me to become a full-time canvasser for the Center for Political Innovation under the outreach organization called the John Brown Volunteers. I arrived in New York City that night at a hotel room in Jersey City with one bed, where Joey, aka Yankee Tanky, had lived for several days before. Joey and I quickly got to know each other, both having to live in such a small space and travel into Manhattan daily. Holy shit, they were living in a place with one bed? Dude. In the coming months, Caleb and I would get to know each other on a very personal level. Caleb would mention wanting to leave his wife and how miserable it was back in his hometown in Ohio. Looking back, many, if not most of the things Caleb expressed to me in private were designed to suddenly pit Joey and I against each other, culminating with the bestowing of the Akik ring immediately before going to Texas in December. Caleb wanted us both vying for his favor at the expense of respecting one another. Caleb saw the Akik ring in Iran. He wears one all the time because it is a symbol of power. After promising Joey and I we would both receive one, instead he gave one only to me in New York City before I left for Texas. At the time, he told me it was a status symbol, that only his most trusted inner circle could wear a ring like his. Therefore, people will notice we were all wearing the same ring everywhere, And when I got back to home to Jersey City, it was awkward when Joey noticed it, and I didn't have an explanation for why I got one and he didn't. I eventually stopped wearing it because I felt disgusted with everything this represented. A manipulation tactic Caleb used to make each of us think we were individually special to him and that he trusted each of us the most. Caleb also gave one to another member who I was very close to, Lily. This trick of playing members off each other was not limited to Joey and me. Lily also has experience and admitted to this being a reality. Now, real quick, I believe I have this here. Hold on one second. Let me bring this up. I believe I can corroborate this with photographic evidence. Let me just make sure I've got it still here. I didn't realize. Yes, here we go. This is the one. So this was posted by Keaton Mansfield. The ring of loyalty to Maupin given to me in December before going to Texas. Now worn by the one and only CPI exec still loyal to Maupin. That is the ring right there. This is Keaton Mansfield's, I believe this is his former. I don't know if he's still on Twitter right now. And this is a picture of him talking about the ring and with a picture of it at their last convention. So just so that you're aware, the ring is not made up. This is a real thing. A literal loyalty ring, as if this couldn't get any more culty. Okay? Holy shit. This trick of playing members off each other was not limited to Joey and me. Lily has also experienced and admitted to this being a reality. When Caleb, Lily, and I were in Nicaragua for their November 2021 elections, Caleb would constantly complain to me about Lily's immaturity and stress how glad he was that his right-hand guy, referring to me, did not act like Lily. When I arrived in New York City, I drove my Buick from Illinois to Jersey City to become a full-time volunteer for CPI. Very much unfamiliar with daily life in cities the size of Jersey and New York, I put my car in the parking garage several blocks from our motel. Several months later, when Caleb wanted us to head south and connect with San Angelo Solidarity, a separate group allied with CPI, he became very angry with me when my car wouldn't start because it had sat idle from July until the end of November. Fortunately for Caleb, my mother was willing to co-sign on a dealer loan for another car, with the understanding that if this car was being used to transport members from New York City to Texas, Maupin would make the car insurance payments every month. Caleb readily agreed to this, excited to send us to San Angelo. However, since December, not a single dime has gone to uphold Caleb's agreement to make payments on the car that was being used solely for his organization. Holy fucking shit. Around the time of New Year's 2022, Caleb sent me a screenshot of an argument he was having with his wife. In it, you can see him mention he plans to make enough money off of CPI that he can quit his job at Russia Today. He also blatantly says that he will live in a compound in the woods where he would live with the kids. Holy shit. That's not how adults act. That's why I am moving up in the world and you aren't. You don't know or have social skills. You are the one. I am asserting myself like an adult and I might get my bonus. Dream. Eventually, I'm going to make enough money with CPI that I will quit RT and then I will leave you also. I'm going to set up a big compound in the woods where I live with all the kids and a studio to broadcast my show all over the internet. You are crazy. And then his wife sends this cray-cray emoji, which is the most boomer thing I've ever seen. I don't know how fucked up you have to be to say, I'm gonna set up a big compound where I live with all the kids. Guys, honestly, you know what that sounds like? Does that not sound like what like a evil gnome would say in like a German fairy tale? Come out to my compound in the middle of the woods. Come, I live in a compound in the woods with the children. Come, children. It's literally like I don't know. Like how much more mask off can you go? After driving this car from New York to Texas, Texas to Chicago, Chicago to Kansas, and countless trips from the retreat center to the airport an hour away, the car gave out. I feel I was being tasked to drive for CPI to ensure I was not present at any facilitator meetings, despite the fact that only a few months before that, Caleb was praising me as CPI's most important asset. On the last day of the retreat, as everyone was preparing to go home, the transmission gave out, leaving me stranded in Kansas. After telling Caleb my car, which I'd then put 40,000 miles on in 6 months specifically for CPI work, had broken down, his immediate concern was having drivers to make airport trips. About a week and a half before the Kansas retreat, Caleb called me about an idea to get another young member named James, we're not using his real name because we were unsure if we could talk to him, to go immediately from the Kansas retreat to Chicago after it ended in June, and to stay there even after the Chicago CPI conference on August 6th was over. James was 18 years old, had just graduated high school, and was about to begin college on the East Coast. Caleb planned for us to get him to stay in Chicago full-time by acting as if he thought he would join us, so when we saw him in person, he would repeatedly say we were excited for him to come to Chicago and work with us, despite the reality being that we knew he hadn't planned on staying at all. On the phone call where Caleb laid out his plan, he instructed me to say things I knew were false, to pressure James, and to keep him in an awkward position, to keep saying that he actually couldn't go to Chicago with CPI. The idea was to get him to break down, change his mind, and finally go with Caleb. Holy fuck. Caleb wanted to eventually make it so awkward that James would convince himself he needs to do this to have a political future. Caleb ultimately wanted him to give up his old life, move to Chicago, forego college, drop his plans, and just commit to CPI full time. James's father is an arms inspector for a major global organization, and Caleb strategically felt he could protect himself from government pressure by having the son of an arms inspector on his side. This fits Caleb's pattern of attempting to split young people from their families, take advantage of them to more easily manipulate them, and then condition them for his cult. He was even nervous about me going back home to Illinois to see my parents one weekend while I was still living in Jersey City. He kept begging me not to leave him in CPI while I was gone, saying, make sure you come back. Caleb also spoke to me about what he was doing sexually with Member 2. He would make inappropriate comments about him to me. And in December 2021, he admitted to me that he hired Member 2 as a sex worker / professional dom. He also made some very lewd comments about Member 2 to me, including through text. After the retreat, Caleb asked me to sign a non-disclosure agreement. He didn't specify exactly what it was about, but he did give hints. Caleb said he would give me the rest of the money he owed me for allowing CPI to use my vehicle if I signed it, which he owed me prior to the creation of an NDA. Over text, I asked Caleb if I could read over the NDA and take some time to make the decision. Caleb took this to mean I am playing hardball and that he could do that too. I restated the money he owed me was accrued before the idea of an NDA was ever created. Caleb's lack of concern for the well-being of any member save himself is in stark contrast to the political line he claims to believe in. Yeah, remember, this guy's a communist. Yeah, he's definitely a super communist. The conduct of Caleb Maupin and CPI is the leading reason I've come to realize I no longer identify with communist political circles. Bro, I mean, I get it though. I fucking get it. I can imagine being burnt out on that if you had to deal with that as well. Section 3B, Joey Shant, aka Yankee Tanky statement. Back in June 2021, when I was 27 years old, I went to the Saxton Lectures in Pennsylvania specifically to network with folks and to join the CPI. I was strongly inspired by the words of Caleb Maupin and motivated to get out of the movement and into the masses. There I discovered Caleb was putting together an outreach team in New York City, and he invited anyone to talk to him who were interested in joining. I talked to Caleb, and he told me to come out to NYC, and he would have a place for me. I went to New York City only to discover that he didn't have a place, and that I would have to go to a hotel. Caleb told me he didn't want to pay for a hotel room for just me. At this point, I sold a majority of my possessions and used that money to pay for hotel rooms. After the end of the week, I was almost out of money, so I was forced to sell my car to pay for the hotel room in Jersey City. I used that money to pay for a room. At the end of the week, Keaton Mansfield came to Jersey City, which Caleb felt was worth paying for a hotel room for both of us. During our time at the motel room, I used my food stamps to pay for food for me and Keaton. I got about $250 a month to pay for our food. Later, another individual joined us, and my food stamps had to pay for that person as well. Caleb often told us we had to struggle to achieve socialism. In hindsight, I see this was Caleb's attempt to manipulate us into not asking him for money. I am diabetic, and I also have MRSA, which never goes away. So my bad diet connected to our limited budget ultimately led me to my sugar spiking, which fed the MRSA and caused a MRSA infection in which I had to go to the hospital for. The day I went to the hospital, the John Brown volunteers were at a political rally in Times Square. Caleb asked if I could come join my comrades at the rally as soon as I left the hospital, even though I should have been resting and recovering from a MRSA infection. Oh my God. Caleb promised to take care of our food, our housing, and any other material needs that we had. Alas, Caleb failed to provide even the most basic resources to help us survive and insisted we use our canvassing contributions to cover everything. However, canvassing is very slow and tedious work, and it never brought in enough income to sustain us all. I often had to dig through the garbage put out by grocery stores just so that we could all eat. My comrades would even live on less because, according to Caleb, this is what revolutionaries had to do to survive. We would ignore these problems or sometimes have fights with each other. Member 3 would often get in conflicts with me and Keaton about how Caleb should be helping us more, and we would defend Caleb and his treatment of us. We would say to Member 3 that we had to tolerate the mistreatment because it was for the good of the organization. Cult! That is cult! Lay down yourself for the good of the organization. Lay down yourself for the good of the state. Lay down yourself for the good of Caleb Maupin. Cult. Eventually, Member 3 gave up on arguing against our mistreatment and began working as an escort to help us cover our expenses. I was still using my food stamps to keep us fed, but their additional income took care of everything else that our feeble canvassing earnings couldn't cover. Later, when we went to Texas, I came up with the idea of the branch of the CPI called Bridges to Labor, with the goal of building socialist reading groups within workplaces. Upon Caleb learning of this project, he would have private conversations with Keaton, telling him I was trying to steal his spotlight, that I was jealous of Keaton as a way to manipulate Keaton to be against me. I never had any desire to steal Keaton Mansfield's spotlight. Instead, I just wanted to expand the reach of CPI into workplaces, which I viewed as part of the goals of the CPI in the first place. After an argument with Keaton that got me kicked out of the John Brown Volunteers, Caleb offered to pay for a ticket home back to Pennsylvania. He never offered to pay me back for my possessions I sold, including my car. He never offered to provide me any type of housing until I could get myself on my feet. He simply abandoned me with $200, either to be homeless in Texas or to go back to Pennsylvania. I tried to live out in Texas, and I soon realized I couldn't make enough money to get out of the hotel I was staying at, and I would soon be homeless. So I was forced to head back to Pennsylvania. Ultimately, since getting kicked out of the organization, I have been living in an abandoned house to survive, forced into e-begging on the internet to sustain myself while in between jobs. This has affected my public image and thus affected my ability to even make content and organize in the future. Because of these events and the experience of others explained through their testimony, it seems to me that Caleb doesn't actually want to build a think tank, but instead build an organization of yes men willing to do whatever Caleb wants. To maintain that pool of yes men, he will weed out the people who don't follow his orders by manipulating members against each other. Further, Caleb has broken his promises to take care of those who join his organization. I am incredibly disappointed because, quite frankly, Caleb is the whole reason I'm a communist. It pains me to admit that the man I was willing to follow to the end of the earth has mistreated me and many other comrades. Caleb had duped me, he has duped many, he is an endangerment to many within these circles. I am disappointed on who Caleb has revealed himself to be, not a revolutionary, but a grifter trying to build a cult. Let's continue. I first formally met Caleb Maupin in Philadelphia in July of 2016 during the Democratic National Convention. I was protesting and running events with the World Can't Wait at the time. I was 18 years old and had enrolled to begin college in Manhattan just a month later. Oh yeah, by the way, have you noticed that nearly every member started to be targeted by Caleb Maupin, went right out of college or right out of high school? Like literally 18 or 19 every single time. Caleb said he wanted to speak with me once I moved to Manhattan. He had an idea for a new political project. This is how our relationship began and the seeds were planted. Throughout the earlier years of our relationship, he acted as a guide and provided me with direction and opportunities. It wasn't until later that I realized this was largely to help his own image and not out of any genuine spark he saw in me. When I first moved to Manhattan, I hardly knew anybody. Caleb had my undivided attention and confided in me multiple times that I was one of the few people who understood him. He saw such potential in me, etc. Every person. Every single person. He does this to every single person. You're so special. You're such a unique person. This is again, another cult tactic. One of the things most common with cults is the idea the leader will try and make every single person feel like they are the most special person ever. Because if you believe that the leader sees true potential in you, you're more likely to do things. It's not, obviously, it is possible for someone to see a true potential in you. It is possible for someone to be genuinely supportive in that way. But when someone says that to everyone, Nizzy says, you mean to tell me that people who subscribe to communist ideologies that rely on great man theory are susceptible to being manipulated by charismatic preacher types with delusions of grandeur who see themselves as the next Mao or Lenin? Yup. Fast forward to 2020, our relationship took a turn for the worst. When I was forced to move back to PA because of the economic situation brought on by the pandemic, Caleb repeatedly expressed his opposition to me remaining with my family for an extended period of time. I thought this was weird, but I didn't think much of it since the plan wasn't for me to remain in PA for too long. Of course, the pandemic and the lockdowns lasted longer than we originally thought. Throughout 2020 and 2021, Caleb repeatedly tried to convince me to drop everything and move back to New York City and New Jersey. He was insistent that my continuing to have a relationship with my family and childhood friends was the root cause of all issues in my life. Huh, I wonder what that sounds like. Doesn't that sound like exactly what you would do if you were trying to isolate someone socially? Textbook. He said I would never get anywhere or get a career like this if I didn't shun them and have minimal contact with any of these people I held close to my heart. His efforts to get me to isolate myself from my family and friends would intensify when I would come to him when I was experiencing pits in my mental health and was more vulnerable. There were times when I was crying to him about how unhappy I was generally in life, not even bringing up my family, and his advice was to move into some hotel in New Jersey with other people I hardly knew in the next few days. He wanted me to disappear in the eyes of my family and friends and job to join the John Brown Volunteers. It was at this point that I realized that this was also a point that he would bring up any time I went home for holidays or long weekends, whenever I was outside of his sphere of influence or control. Whenever I would express that there were people in my life that I didn't intend to drop, he would be visibly upset with this and continue to urge me to do so. I thought this was bizarre, but I figured it was just a friend being overzealous and trying to convince me to do things they were convinced would make me happier. In July of 2021, I helped put together the CPI conference in Saxton, PA. I drove from my location in PA to pick Caleb up in New York, then drove to Saxton, back to New York City, and back to my location in PA in order to check out the venue Caleb selected. This day was 12 hours of driving on my part with zero compensation besides gas itself, despite my suggestions to make the trip easier on me. Once I got to the conference site a day or two early to set up and train to be a moderator, I realized again how nefarious a lot of the tactics and methods Caleb were pushing were. Each of us were given a few attendees to, quote-unquote, look after. We were instructed to practice, quote-unquote, deep listening and to never break eye contact with the people we were speaking with, a sort of weird psychologically intimidating practice. Everything at this conference was orchestrated to the last detail by Caleb. People's reactions to the lines of his speeches, attendees in the inner circle had certain lines to rehearse and perfect to Caleb's liking, and conversations were simulated in order to elicit certain responses. Wait a minute, this is just the rehearsal. This is just Nathan Fielder's The Rehearsal. Am I wrong? Simulated conversations in order to guarantee to elicit certain responses? What the fuck? A few months later, Caleb invited me along on a CPI delegation to Nicaragua, along with himself and 2 other CPI members. The trip would be around a week long. At first, I was interested and excited about the prospect of going to Nicaragua, but I soon found out that it would be logistically impossible. I was paying housing costs, I had a full-time job, bills, a car payment. I couldn't shell out extra hundreds of dollars for a specialty COVID test, extra cost associated with the trip, etc. At the time, I didn't have any paid time off, so all the time off from the trip would also be unpaid. I especially couldn't afford to be stranded in Nicaragua or Mexico, like many other delegations, because of a specific COVID restriction wasn't met. Caleb did not understand this and argued with me about it for days. It was at this point that I believe he realized he didn't have any control over me or practical influence, not like when I was 18, 19, or even 20. My main concern with the trip turned out to be well placed because his delegation got stranded in Mexico for an extra couple of days because of specific COVID test result specifications. The trip I already couldn't afford would have been a financial disaster for me. Much to my surprise, Caleb demanded I send him $500 while they were in Nicaragua for the flight I didn't take and for refusing to go to Nicaragua. Caleb explained that they had raised the money for my ticket. I wondered why he felt entitled to $500 that didn't end up coming out of his pocket. When I was offered a trip to Venezuela through my own contacts shortly thereafter, I took it. The expenses were covered and COVID tests didn't pose a problem because of different restrictions. About a month after I got back, having not heard from Caleb or CPI, I reached out to Caleb as to why this was. Caleb was furious with me. He called my trip to Venezuela a big FU to him and was livid that I didn't notify or consult him. He said I didn't belong in group settings and didn't understand what being in an organization entails. He also suggested that maybe you should ask yourself why you had a total of 3 friends in your entire post-secondary educational experience. We eventually agreed to stop arguing and came to a rough understanding, but it was clear our relationship was on a greater decline than before. This discussion with him was in December 2021. This is the last time we had a substantive conversation besides small talk. I hadn't thought much of my experiences with Caleb and CPI until I reached out to other people who had also left the group in the past few months. When I found out that some of the exact same lines that Caleb heaped upon me had also been said to other CPI members, the dots started to connect. All the people who Caleb approached share a couple of things in common. They feel lost, they have little sense of belonging to a supportive community, they have problems with family and friends, they are disillusioned, they have little to no direction, they have low self-esteem, they are longing for a purpose, and they want to change the world for the better. They are almost always younger, between the ages of 16 and 20, have little experience in the political realm, and crave guidance. These traits also make somebody the perfect candidate for grooming and or cult manipulation. Caleb's obsession with public speaking's power of persuasion, as well as his obsession with manipulative psychology, makes a lot more sense with the knowledge I now have. Caleb made me feel like his star pupil or something to that effect when I was manipulatable and also providing large amounts of exposure and clout for himself and his organization, also himself. Once I made it clear I was not just a manipulatable pawn of his, I was dropped gradually from his interest. I believe that he has a vision for CPI to be a loose cult around himself. All the reading material is written by him and is always on sale at every event. He would constantly complain that he is not recognized by the world enough, that he should be a communist rock star. I believe that there are people currently in CPI who are in the same position I was when I was 18 or 19. I hope they are able to understand the danger of the situation before they too outlive their usefulness to Caleb. This is not about politics. I hope all the people who feel let down by these revelations about Caleb and CPI do not lose interest. There is a place for non-identity politics-centered populist organizing. But not from within a cult or in pursuit of further inflating of a sociopathic demagogue's ego. "3D, Madeline's statement. I became involved with Caleb Maupin's think tank, CPI, in December of 2021 when I was 23. Since my involvement, there have been a few incidents which have alarmed me regarding Maupin's direction of CPI and the treatment of his members. I will be focusing on one personal conversation as well as a general overview of his recent political retreat in June. A conversation that struck me as strange in March 2022 seems to have deeper significance given the information brought to light by other members. Caleb told me a story of President LBJ spanking students he was teaching while in Texas in the 1920s. I thought this was odd, as the story didn't really have much bearing on our conversation, and I wasn't sure how to respond to it. It felt out of place. I said I think spanking children is an immoral thing to do. It is my feeling that Caleb purposefully brought up this story in order to test the waters on my reaction to corporal punishment or spanking, or to encourage me to discuss my own experience if I had any. This lines up with the information brought up by member number 1. Given the fact that he is admitted to subtly hinting at his sexual fetish or outright asking women their thoughts on it, it seems to me this was his way of testing my reaction. While my particular experience here is relatively benign, it seems to fit a pattern of Caleb bringing up the topic of spanking with people who are unaware of his sexual proclivities related to spanking. If I had not made it clear I was against that sort of punishment, Caleb may have used that conversation to later open up about his fetish as he has with others. My second concern is the fact that Caleb has made it clear he has intentions to direct his members in a cultish manner. Many people know that he enjoys reading about cults and will even discuss the history of cults over live streams, etc. However, observing his direction of CPI has made it obvious he wants to implement some of the tactics he has read about. I was selected as a facilitator for his June CPI retreat and noticed multiple instances of these bizarre tactics at the facilitator training. First, an exercise of deep listening was conducted in which facilitators were instructed to maintain continuous, unbroken eye contact with the attendee, show engaged body language, and ultimately memorize the conversation in order to make the attendee feel closely bonded to the facilitator. There was then a compliment giving receiving exercise done in order to rehearse interacting with guests. What the hell? Caleb also requested that retreat facilitators approach attendees in the morning and ask them about their dreams the night before. The content of the retreat was going to affect people not only on a conscious level, but on a subconscious level, and Caleb wanted to learn about the psychological effects of his political retreat on the attendees. He also explained that attendees should be separated from those with whom they arrived with in order for them to make friends with others. Bruh. Thirdly, facilitators were made to practice group chanting during the facilitator training. This included multiple minutes of chanting different political slogans and phrases. Maupin explicitly said this activity was meant to break the taboo around group chanting. Group chanting was used often throughout the entire retreat, usually with some sort of cue that prompted them to begin the chant. Okay, hold on. We're gonna take a really quick break. Just 1 second. We're gonna take a real quick break so that we can revisit something from earlier. Okay, everybody?
Bazinga.
Lastly, Caleb had facilitators repeatedly rehearse his big entrance. This consisted of prolonged clapping when he entered the room, him giving out handshakes and hugs, and extended chanting. Caleb told us he wanted to jolt people upon his arrival to the retreat building. This rehearsal was repeated 3 times. While these activities may come across as strange or awkward, it's concerning that they show the beginning of Caleb's implementation of manipulation tactics. It's one thing to want to foster an uplifting, positive environment. It's another thing to use cult tactics and mechanically rehearse certain behavioral cues in order to manipulate people. I have met a number of excellent, genuine individuals through my work with CPI who I am so glad to call my friends. It saddens me to see these people be unknowingly used for Caleb's own personal gain, rather than have their talents as political activists be used for authentic anti-imperialist purposes. All of us were brought together because of an interest in building a strong and compassionate political community. The ambitions of one self-interested person should not supersede the political goals of all of us. So after this, we have corroboration from other members. Nick, aka Flame of Liberation, makes a statement in support. I'm writing this to establish how far back I and Caleb go in political organizing. I'm going to skim through this. We're not going to read this whole one because this is just corroboration. I considered Caleb Maupin to be a close comrade since 2014. I was 19 years old at the time. There we go again. Past 8 years, I consistently defended him and promoted him. Me, member 1, member 2, DL, and Caleb gave out information about the truth about Venezuela at that time. So this is somebody who's deeply involved. With regards to member 2, they first got involved in the fall of 2018. Member 2 gave a very good class on the history of U.S. imperialism and was very active. In 2021, member 2 was active with the newly formed John Brown Volunteers, which is a full-time outreach. Member 2, along with Joey and Keaton, would do consistent outreach. Half the money would go to the volunteers to survive off, and the other half would go to CPI, or in other words, it would go directly to Caleb Maupin. Jesus Christ. I was also totally unaware that member 2, who was in massive student loan debt, was resorting to sex work for survival. I was all the more disturbed to find out later that Caleb Maupin was fully aware of this, and member 2 was using that money to feed themselves and the other JBVs. Holy moly. And here's where the texts come from. In the same screenshot, you can also see he accidentally admits to something that I hadn't already known. So here Caleb admits to this person, this is to Nick, admits to Nick that they were involved, that he was involved with member 2. You can clearly see he believes member 2 was still part of the group. I was surprised when he mentioned verbal abuse. This was the first time Caleb had mentioned any of this sexual stuff to me, and I believe he said it because he had lost track of what he had told to whom. Jesus. Lies about addiction, more lies about addiction, more lies about addiction. Caleb was lying to me to try and preemptively discredit member 2 in case they ever came forward. Regarding the cult aspect of CPI, Caleb has made it very clear that he has studied cults in depth. He often will talk about this cult or that cult during his YouTube live streams. He insisted we do deep listening. Here's more about this. This is going to affect people just not on a conscious level, but a subconscious level. There's all of his stuff. Bizarre psychoanalysis. It's very clear Caleb Maupin has ambitions to lead a cult and that he has been responsible for sexual misconduct and then went on to push them out and slander them, which is totally unacceptable. So this is a pretty major corroboration. Now we have another corroboration from Joel Gale, Joe the Red. The first people I ever organized with was Caleb Maupin, along with many other like-minded comrades. The recent events have left me heartbroken and lost in my political life. The pain that he has caused people who trusted him, the alleged lies and manipulation, all things I never thought Caleb was capable of. I feel foolish and naive to have put so much trust in him. Okay. Don D. He betrayed my trust with his selfish and ethical behavior. He took advantage of young comrades who were in need, urging one person to prostitute themselves to pay the rent on a wretched hotel apartment where 2 other comrades were already living rent-free. Mistake could be forgiven, but this is an issue of Caleb's repeated behaviors and of his character. 5, going forward, this is more about This is basically what they're planning to do going forward. You can reach out at Center for Political Innovation New York at Gmail, and more, and the opening statement from the beginning. So that brings us to the end of this section. We have now done all of the reading. We have done all the necessary reading. We have done all of the necessary establishing, all of the receipts and everything. You now see what we're talking about. Now is the portion where we discuss our feelings and thoughts about this whole situation. From my perspective, this is going to be probably a shorter segment than usual, because this is pretty clear cut. Most of the time we have some pretty significant stuff to go back and forth on. We want to check the veracity of a lot of this, but if I'm completely honest, this letter is extremely well backed up, cross-referenced, and all of the members who were involved in it, which is total 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 different members of CPI, some of them foundational members, most of them foundational members, including Keaton Mansfield and Joey Shantz, 2 of the foundational members of CPI, have signed off on this, and the CPI Board of Leaders has already stepped down in solidarity. There isn't a whole lot we actually have to verify in this particular situation. They've done the verification. They did their due diligence. This letter was put together and structured very professionally. Now, the only other thing we can talk about is how many warning signs there were, okay? So that's one of the things, this is one of the things that I think is really important. Because the fact of the matter is, there are a lot of people just like this still operating in leftist spaces. There are a lot of people who are not only extremely hungry for power, but extremely willing to exploit others openly, often, in order to get what they want. And this is something that people need to be careful about. As it turns out, being a leftist doesn't mean anything. Just saying you're a leftist doesn't really do anything at all. It doesn't change anything at all. Oh yeah, some people sent me that one. Yeah, I agree. I think even before I was streaming, I had already heard of Maupin, and I already had critiques of Maupin. And I think Vosh was spot on in his argument against Maupin. I don't think that Maupin did a very good job hiding it, but what this shows you is that there are a lot of people with good intentions, people who really want to make the world a better place, but who are essentially fooled into becoming the pawns of people like Maupin. And this happens all over the place. I mean, you could talk about Scientology, you could talk about Waco, and the Seventh Day. I mean, you could talk about 100,000 different cults. You could even talk about cults like the Unification Church. As you all know, there was a assassination of Japanese former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe over his support and whitewashing of the Unification Church, a church that operates very similarly, although significantly more successfully, to the way that Caleb Maupin operated his organization. And also, I think this is a pretty strong indication of the fact that not only is communism not like a meaningless word in and of itself. Saying that you are a communist or saying that you believe in communism doesn't mean jack shit, just like I said before, but also that in fact, certain veins and certain types, certain structures, breeds, strains, whatever you want to call it, certain types of communism are predispose people towards this falling into organizations like this. Marxism-Leninism is a type of communism. Highly centralized communism is a set of ideologies that argue for constructing organizations just like this. People like Caleb Maupin are the natural outcome of a group that seeks to put power into the hands of one or a very small handful of people and essentially give them the right to do whatever the hell they want with that power. And it is interesting that it almost always ends up being white, cishet men at the top of these organizations, isn't it? I mean, go take a look at all of the revolutionary ML communist organizations and tell me how many of them are led by cishet white guys who are also sex pests. And I think that there's a danger in, I mean, obviously, much like many of these members said, that like they become, all of the people involved in this have become, at least to some degree, disillusioned with the things they formerly believed in because they were exploited based on genuine beliefs. It seems to me like all of these members, even the ones who were deeper involved and who may have even covered for Maupin at points, all of these members seem to have a genuine belief in these things. And that was exploited, and it's sad. And it's really, really, really unfortunate. Yes, okay, and of course, Progressive Kev brings up, and also that they're dismissive and abusive towards women. Yeah, that's also true. Um, can you blame people who see stuff like this from saying, wow, maybe communism isn't all that it's chalked up to be? And the answer, of course, is that actually not everything that calls itself communism is communism. And that's not really a matter of a no true Scotsman. It's instead, what is communism? What is the communism? What is the actual idea supposed to be there? The idea is to fight for a world where labor is no longer coerced, where you know, money doesn't rule our lives, where money and profit aren't the things that drive us. That's the ideas behind it. But how can you build that type of world if you are structuring an organization that ultimately just says, we're gonna put the right hat on top of capitalism? Wolfgar69 says, my hope is that the collapse of orgs like this is a prelude to better, stronger, actual leftist collaborations that don't rely on hierarchy and cult of personality. Risks of hierarchy and cult of personality will always have to be combated. It is a truth of existence. That is part of the eternal struggle of being a human. Being a human and liberating yourself means you are always going to be struggling against certain forms of domination, and you're always going to be resisting and breaking down cults of personality and hierarchies. However, there are certain structures, certain machines that make that sort of thing easier. Highly centralized organizations where all of the money and deciding power is in the hands of one person, those types of organizations are very vulnerable to being misled. They're vulnerable to being hijacked, and not even just hijacked. That's in the case that they started on good footing to begin with, whereas I don't think that's the case. I think Caleb Maupin sought this out because he has a kink for authoritarianism, and he wants to have he wants to have a group of acolytes who will do whatever he wants. So there's a lot of there needs to be this is a wake-up call, or one of many wake-up calls for the greater leftist movement, the extremely loose, extremely widespread leftist movement. Be careful. Don't just fall for aesthetics. Don't be fooled just because somebody painted a Russian flag or a hammer and sickle on something. Aesthetics cannot be exchanged. Even the name communism, even the proclamations of communism cannot be exchanged for observing the actual actions of those taken, of those leading these movements. If people are not doing, if they're not living the life that they're preaching, if they want you to do things that they themselves are unwilling to do, be suspicious. How many times do we have to be taught this exact lesson? Because I swear it's every couple of months with these people. I mean, I think there's true with, I think it's always going to be a struggle. I think there will always be some people who have a desire to dominate, and to dominate specifically non-consensually. It's interesting. Throughout this conversation, I thought we would have to talk about BDSM and kink more, but actually we didn't even have to, because this whole situation is so blatantly not kink related. It's so blatantly coercive. I barely even had to talk about it at all. But here's something I can talk about with it. A big part of BDSM, it's in the name, is domination and submission. And the key thing about BDSM, about those types of structures, is the consent. You understand? The domination part is and can be fun. Submission is and can be very fun, if it's fucking consensual. The whole, at the core of all communist movements, even the bad ones, at the core is supposedly an idea of fighting against coercion, the idea of fighting back against people being forced to do things that they don't want to do, which is a horrible, horrible experience. Anyone who has experienced any form of coercion knows how rotting it feels. It rots you from the inside out. So we should take this sort of stuff seriously. And this is one of the reasons why I've always fought and pushed very, very hard back against authoritarian ideologies, even authoritarian ideologies that claim to be doing it for your own good. Because they all do that. All of them. Every authoritarian in history claims that they're doing it for your own good. What was the little thing? Can we pull it from his texts directly? Let's bring the text right out. Hold on a second. Let's bring it up. Here we go. Remember the duck? If the boatmaster doesn't spank the duck will be like a sailboat without a rudder, directionless, alone, and with nowhere to go. All authoritarians claim that they're doing it for your own good, whether it's for the glory of the revolution, or for the good of society, or for God, or for your family. All authoritarians claim that they are doing it for your own good. However, are they? Are they really? Are they really doing it for your own good if they're constantly forcing you into horrifically coercive situations where you constantly have to do things that you really don't want to do? I say, fuck no. Fuck no. Bonks Daily says, this probably gives caregivers and littles the worst name. I don't think so. I think this is pretty fairly obvious. It's pretty fairly obvious that this is an incredibly coercive situation, that there is no consensual kink dynamic going on here whatsoever. Every single person who came forward repeatedly mentioned trying to tell Caleb to fuck off, and he kept going anyway. Yeah, exactly, Somniostatic. He's role-playing himself as a child that needs to be punished. Wait, did he make it? Wait, he made a Telegram post? All right, let's take a look. Wait, this is allegedly a Telegram post from Caleb Maupin. Lots of lies about me and what has gone on in CPI are being told, but I clearly have made some very big mistakes. I need time away from social media to get the help I need to ensure I never bring any aspect of my sex life into political spaces ever again. I need time to straighten out my personal life and deal with how this has affected my family. When I feel I'm ready, I will likely return to social media, but these things take time. I know I let a lot of people down and we need time to process. Well, so he's admitting to it. He knows he's fucked. Also, notice this weird thing. Notice this. I will never bring any aspect of my sex life into political spaces ever again. That's a little sly turn of hand, isn't it? Isn't it? That almost sounds a little bit like what the ex-gay Christians do, right? Where ex-gay Christians go, oh Lord, I have sinned. I will never again let my homosexuality impact my faith, and I'll make sure that no other homosexuals allow their homosexuality to affect their faith in public. It sounds like he's setting up for a anti-sex arc where he can act like he's the champion of being against it because he fucked up and he knows what it's like to be in the grips of sexual exploitation. Yeah, that is the same thing he told member 2. Yes, notice. It has nothing to do about bringing your sex life into political spaces. As you guys know, I'm very open about my, well, I'm not super open, but I'm pretty open about my sex life. I talk about sexuality and sex all the time. I am sometimes very candid with certain aspects of my sex life, but there's a key difference. You all can shut the show off whenever the fuck you want. You all, and there's no possible way you can be harmed by doing that. If you're not interested in what I'm talking about, you can go away. Caleb Maupin is pinning people into financial bondage and then forcing them to indulge his kinks. It's not about sex in politics. Sex is political. What it's about is about Caleb Maupin forcing himself on other people repeatedly, over and over and over again, and manipulating their lives so that he can continue to victimize them against their will. And he can't say no. I talk about my BDSM relationships frequently because I think it's valuable to have those discussions on a consensual basis. That statement on Telegram sounds like he's laying the groundwork to come back and have an anti-sex arc, where he comes back and he preaches against Western sexual degeneracy so that he can continue to grift and find victims and get away with it through plausible deniability. But this video ain't going anywhere. That letter ain't going anywhere. And the knowledge that's now in all of your heads ain't going anywhere. So as I always say, we protect us. Oh, cool. Yeah, let's take a look at this. Oh, yeah. So sick. Really amazing. The same people who call it abuse when Caleb Maupin does kink or has an addiction either is deserving of empathy, spend all day talking about how beautiful their sex thing is. Fuck you. First of all, fuck Peter Coffin. I sure hope nobody ever digs into the horrible and sordid history Peter Coffin has with regards to sexual abuse. It sure would be a shame if it was really easy to find on the internet the allegations against Peter Coffin. Fuck Maupin, fuck all these people. So yeah, that's the conclusion of the DramaMama, by the way, which is there is so much evidence against Caleb Maupin here, and Caleb Maupin has literally admitted to at least some of this. I hope that he continues to blast into obscurity. I hope he never returns to these spaces. I hope that far and wide his crimes are published so that no one will ever allow him a leadership position in communist spaces ever again.